Hey guys, welcome to Mild Moments History. Tonight, your mind is no longer in your room. Imagine you are there on a strange shore of ancient Crete. The air here smells different, not of the cedar wood and bustling markets of your Phoenician home, but of wild thyme, sea salt, and damp earth after an afternoon rain. This island is beautiful, but its beauty holds a quiet sorrow, like a cage made of sunlight and sea breeze. You see her Europa standing alone on the sand, her eyes looking out at the distant sea. And when a white crested wave crashes on the shore, you can almost see in her gaze the reflection of a great white bull, the one that carried her here. In tonight's journey, we will walk with her the first steps on this new land, not as a victim, but as a reluctant queen learning to find herself in the midst of loss. And as always, where are you listening from? And what time is it for you? I'd love to know. If you love these quiet journeys into the past, like this one, maybe hit subscribe. It means more to me than you know. Now, dim the lights. Let your body sink deep into the mattress. Maybe turn on a fan for a gentle hum. Her story doesn't end with the sea journey. It begins on the shore. And tonight, you are there too, right beside her. Imagine you are there but unseen. You are a breeze, a shadow, a silent observer. Through your eyes we see Europa's new world. Her home is not a palace, not yet. It is a simple shelter nestled into the coastal cliffs, perhaps a cave transformed by Zeus's quiet magic, or a small white stone house left behind by the island's inhabitants. The air here always carries the faint scent of sea salt and the wild thyme that grows on the rocks. The stone walls are cool to her touch, even in the heat of the Mediterranean afternoon. You see her sitting often at the threshold, looking out at the deep blue sea, a shade of blue, so different from the waters of her Phoenician home. She no longer hears the clamor of the spice markets, no longer smells the cedar wood of the great ships. Here, the only sounds are the steady rhythm of waves against the shore, the hum of cicadas in the olive groves, and the occasional cry of a mountain goat wandering nearby. She has a small bed, just a straw pallet covered with a simple linen sheet. Everything here is simple, unadorned. There are no embroidered tapestries, no ornate pottery. But there is a strange peace. You watch her walk alone along the shore, collecting curiously shaped shells and pebbles smoothed by the waves. She is learning the names of plants and wildflowers she has never seen before. This is a kind of captivity, but also a kind of freedom. There are no courtly rituals, no judging eyes. There is only her, the island, and an unseen God who is always watching. But every evening as the sun sinks into the sea, you see the loneliness return to her eyes. She looks eastward toward the home she has lost, and her small shoulders tremble slightly. This island is a home, but it is not her home. The food here also has the taste of a foreign land. You see simple wooden plates placed at her door each day, bearing dishes she has never tasted. They appear like a miracle, a silent provision from Zeus. There is goat cheese, white and soft, its briny flavor, so different from the sweet date cheese of her homeland. There are plump olives cured in oil, their slightly bitter and rich taste making her wince at first, but she slowly grows accustomed to them. She learns to eat them, dipping pieces of crisp barley bread into the oil. Her meals often include fresh fish, grilled over hot coals with rosemary. Its wild, clean scent fills the air. Sometimes there are sweet figs, their nectar dripping onto her fingers, and honey, golden as sunlight, is mixed with cool spring water. Every meal is a discovery, but also a reminder. There are no stews rich with cinnamon and saffron, no pomegranates red as rubies that she used to eat in her father's garden, no complex pastries of her homeland. The food here is simple, nourishing, tied to the earth and sea. You watch her eat slowly, savoring each new flavor. Sometimes she pauses, her eyes distant, and you know she is trying to recall a familiar taste from her memory. But there is none. Each bite is an act of acceptance, another step deeper into this new life. It nourishes her body, but it also makes the ache of homesickness in her soul more vivid. In her Phoenician home, Europa was taught to worship Astarte, the goddess of love and war, and Baal, the god of storms and fertility. Every day she would light incense and whisper familiar prayers. But here on this island, those names seem to fade into the air. Her prayers have nowhere to go. You see her sitting before a small, self-made altar of pebbles, but there are no statues, no familiar symbols. She feels her faith is adrift like a ship without a harbor. The only god who is truly present here is the one who brought her, Zeus. She does not see him as a majestic god with a thunderbolt in hand. To her, he is the gentle white bull, the warm breeze, the eagle that circles the mountaintop, an invisible but constant presence. She does not worship him with fear. Their relationship is more complex than that. It is a mixture of gratitude for being saved from loneliness, resentment for being robbed of her home, and a strange growing intimacy, a connection beyond the mortal world. You watch as she learns to read the omens of this new land. The cry of an owl in the night is no longer a bad sign. She learns to see it as a guardian of the darkness. A pod of dolphins dancing in the bay is not just a beautiful sight. She sees it as a blessing from the sea. Her faith is no longer in temples, but in the nature that surrounds her. She is creating a new belief system, a faith woven from survival observation and the silent bond with the God who changed her life. The solitary days begin to change as a new life starts to grow within her. You see Europa's initial confusion as she realizes she is with child. Who is this child? To which world does it belong? It is the child of a god, a being half mortal, half divine. Her loneliness begins to be replaced by a profound sense of responsibility. She is no longer living just for herself. You see her walking the shore, one hand resting on her belly, whispering stories of Phoenicia to one who has not yet been born. She tells of the markets, the ships, the songs her mother used to sing. This is a subtle but a powerful shift. She is no longer a captive princess. She is about to become a mother, the mother of the future kings of this island. The burden of an unseen dynasty begins to settle on her shoulders. You see her begin to gather herbs, learn to weave softer fabrics, preparing for the arrival of a being who will connect her to this land forever. The homesickness is still there, but now it has a purpose. She must build a home not just for herself, but for the children to come. The future is no longer an empty void. It is coming in the shape of a child, her first son with Zeus. And with him, a new chapter of her life and of this entire island is about to begin. Imagine you are there as the sun sets over Crete, painting the shore in a soft, violet light. The day's heat begins to fade, replaced by a cool breeze that drifts in from the water. You see her Europa sitting alone on a rocky outcrop, her simple linen dress fluttering around her ankles. She is not looking at the sunset. She is listening. The sound of the sea here is different. In her Phoenician home, the water was a gentle murmur, the sound of waves lapping against the hulls of trading ships, a sound mixed with the distant cries of merchants and the bells of camels. It was the sound of life, of commerce, of home. But this sea, the Cretan sea, speaks a different language. It is a deep, resonant hum that seems to rise from the very bones of the earth. The waves crash with a hollow roar, a wild and lonely sound that echoes the emptiness of the horizon. She closes her eyes. You see her try to summon the memory of her home port, searching for the familiar chaos, the clatter of sandals on stone, the scent of cedar and spices, the laughter of her companions. But those sounds are ghosts, now faint echoes that are drowned out by the relentless crash and sigh of the waves right here, right now. The sea, the very thing that carried her here, is also the wall that keeps her from ever going back. Each wave is a reminder of the distance, each crash a measure of what was lost. But as you watch her, you notice the fear in her posture has gone. It has been replaced by something else, a quiet resignation, a kind of listening. This sound, this wild and lonely sea, is the only thing that has been with her through the entire journey. It holds the memory of her past and the truth of her present. She is no longer fighting it. She begins to breathe with it, letting the rhythm of the water become her own. Inhale with the pull of the tide, exhale with its release against the sand. The air grows cooler. The first stars begin to appear one by one in the darkening sky, and in that deep stillness, carried on the breeze, from the island's interior, you sense her notice something else, a new scent cutting through the salt, a familiar fragrance she has tried so hard to forget, the scent of cedarwood. That scent, it doesn't belong on this island. You watch as she inhales deeply, her eyes closing as if by instinct, and for a moment, just a moment, she is no longer on the shores of Crete. She is back in her childhood room in Phoenicia, a space filled with a warm, dry light that she had almost forgotten. The memory is not of the person, but of an object, the great cedarwood chests, where her mother stored the finest linens. She can see the deep, red-hued wood, the intricate carvings of vines and birds that her small fingers used to trace for hours. She remembers the sound it made when it opened a soft, solid sigh. But most of all, she remembers the smell, the rich, warm fragrance of the wood mingled with the faint, sweet scent of myrrh. It was the smell of safety, of order, of a life that was neat, predictable, and hers, a life sealed away from the chaos of the world. It is a perfect, polished memory, so clear and so real that it hurts. You see a single tear escape from beneath her closed eyelid, tracing a slow, silent path down her cheek. It is not a tear of fear, but of an unbearable, beautiful ache. It is the grief of remembering something you didn't know you had treasured so deeply until it was gone forever. Just as quickly as it came, the memory dissolves like smoke. The scent of cedar is gone, replaced once more by the sharp salt of the sea breeze and the wild herbs of the island. She opens her eyes. The world is the same, but she is different. The emptiness in her chest is now a vivid, familiar hollow. She rises to her feet, not with purpose, but with a quiet drift. Her legs carry her away from the shore, inland towards a grove of twisted, ancient olive trees. She is searching, not for a way back, but for a different scent, a different truth, something that belongs to this place. You follow in her footsteps deeper into the island. The shore and the sound of the waves recede behind you, giving way to a warm, deep stillness. She steps into a grove of olive trees, their trunks so twisted and ancient they seem to have been here since the beginning of time. She reaches out a hesitant hand and touches the bark of the nearest tree. It is not smooth and polished, like the cedar of her memories. It is gnarled rough, a tapestry of cracks and fissures that tells a story of centuries of sun wind and quiet endurance. This is the texture of survival, and something in her recognizes it. The air here is different, sheltered from the sea breeze. It is warm and smells of dry earth and sun-baked leaves. You watch as she sits down, leaning her back against the solid trunk. Sunlight filters through the silver-green leaves above, creating a shifting pattern of light and shadow on the ground, dancing across her simple dress. This is her first conversation on the island, a conversation held in silence. She listens to the gentle rustle of the leaves, a soft whispering sound that asks for nothing. It does not judge her. It does not demand an answer. It is simply there. Among people, silence can be heavy with unspoken thoughts. Here, it is light, full of peace. And for the first time since she was taken from her home, you see the tension in her shoulders begin to dissolve. She is not a captive here. She is a guest. She has found new companions. They are silent, wise, and deeply rooted in this new earth. They do not know her past, and they do not ask about her future. They offer only their presence, their shade, their quiet strength. This grove becomes her sanctuary, the one place on this strange island that feels like a secret she can keep for herself. A place where she can unburden herself of the weight of being a future queen and simply be. When she finally leaves the grove, you see a subtle change in the way she walks, a little more steady, a little more grounded. Her gaze still drifts to the sea, but now it is not only with longing. It is with a question. The white bull, the god who brought her to this place, could he also be a part of this newfound peace? You watch her as she returns to the shore, but this time she doesn't sit. She walks along the water's edge, letting the cool foam wash over her bare feet. Her mind is no longer just on the home she lost, but on the journey that brought her here. She is thinking of him, the bull. The memory is no longer a sharp, terrifying flash. It has softened, becoming something more complex, more mythic. She remembers the impossible white of his coat, whiter than sea foam, whiter than clouds. She remembers the strange gentleness in his eyes. They were not the wild, unthinking eyes of a beast, but calm and ancient, holding a deep, unsettling intelligence. He had not been violent. He had simply been inevitable. She recalls the moment she climbed onto his back, her friends laughing on the shore, thinking it was a game. She remembers the feel of his powerful muscles moving beneath her, not with rage, but with a purpose as smooth and certain as the tide. And when he moved into the sea, she remembers the moment of panic, yes, but also a strange sense of surrender, as if she was being carried not by an animal, but by a force of nature itself. You see her gaze drift to a distant meadow on the cliffs, where a real bull grazes its dark form, a stark contrast to the white specter in her mind. A few months ago, the sight might have filled her with fear. Now, she watches it with a kind of contemplative awe. It is a creature of this land, powerful, wild, yet a part of the island's deep and steady peace. And she begins to understand. The white bull was not a monster that stole her away. He was a god who chose her, a powerful, unknowable being who carried her across the threshold between her old life and a new destiny. The shadow of the bull no longer feels like a threat hanging over her past. It feels like a presence, a divine shadow that stretches across this entire island, touching the olive groves, the wild thyme, and the children now growing within her. They are his legacy, and in that moment she realizes so is she. Time on the island began to flow differently, no longer measured by Europa's loneliness, but by the quiet rhythms of a new life. Her first son, Minos, was born not in a grand palace, but in the simple stone dwelling by the sea. You watch as she holds him, this small being, who is half hers and half something else entirely. He is a beautiful child, with his mother's dark eyes, but they hold a strange, ancient light, a knowing stillness that is all his own. He rarely cries. When he looks at her, it is not with the unfocused gaze of an infant, but with a deep, steady connection that feels older than time. She feels the divine spark in him, a quiet and sometimes unsettling power. He is the son of Zeus, and in the curve of his small hand, she sees the echo of a god's strength. Her days are no longer spent staring at the sea, lost in memories of Phoenicia. They are filled with the simple grounding rituals of motherhood. Feeding him, singing soft, forgotten lullabies from her homeland, watching the rise and fall of his chest as he sleeps. One afternoon, in the shade of the olive grove that has become her sanctuary, you see her kneeling on the soft earth. Minos, now old enough to stand, wobbles before her, his small hands gripping her fingers for balance. He is looking at the ground, at the unfamiliar texture of grass and soil, with an intense curiosity. She lets go of one of his hands, whispering words of encouragement, her voice soft and low. He takes a hesitant step, then another. His small body is a study in determination. He stumbles, falls, and looks up at her, not with tears, but with a flicker of frustration. She smiles and helps him up. Again he tries. One step, two. He lets go of her hand entirely. For a single, breathless moment, he stands alone on the Cretan earth, a future king finding his footing. He takes a step, then another, a clumsy, joyful lurch towards his mother. And in that moment, as she catches him in her arms, Europa's heart is filled with a fierce, protective love that eclipses all her sorrow. She is no longer just an exile. She is a mother, the mother of a king, and as she looks down at his small, determined face, she sees not just a child, but the shadow of a crown. She wonders with a shiver of both pride and fear what kind of ruler a boy born from a god and a lonely princess will become. You watch her in the years that follow, as Minos and his brothers grow from infants into boys, with scuffed knees and curious eyes. Europa has changed. The sharp edge of her grief, has softened not into forgetfulness, but into a deep, quiet understanding of the island that is now her entire world. She has learned its language, a language not of words, but of atmosphere. She spends long hours on the cliffs, not gazing back towards the east, but watching the patterns of the world around her. She has learned to read the wind. She knows that a breeze from the south feels different, warmer, softer, carrying the faint dry scent of a distant land she imagines is Africa. A wind from the north is sharp and clean, smelling of cold stone and the high mountains hidden in the island's heart. She can feel a storm coming hours before the clouds gather, just by a subtle shift in the air's pressure, a change in the way the olive leaves tremble. The sea, once a symbol of her isolation, has become a scroll she can read. She understands the difference between the short, angry waves whipped up by a local squall and the long, slow, powerful swells that speak of a great storm far out on the open water. She knows the deep, impossible blue of a calm summer morning and the pale, threatening gray of a winter sea. It no longer sounds like a roar of exile. It is now a conversation, a constant and familiar murmur. It is the island's heartbeat, and she has learned to feel it as her own. This knowledge gives her a quiet power. She is no longer a stranger here, at the mercy of the elements. She is a part of them. She knows when to bring the goats to shelter, when to dry herbs, when the fishing will be good. The people of the island, the few native shepherds and fishermen who live in the scattered villages, begin to notice. They see the Phoenician woman not as a lost princess, but as someone who listens to the land. She is becoming Cretan, not by blood but by breath, and by observation. She has found a new kind of sovereignty, one that is earned through listening, not commanding. You see them in the quiet hours of the afternoon, when the sun is low and the shadows of the olive trees are long. Europa sits with her sons Minos and his brothers, their small hands in hers. She is not teaching them the language of the Cretan wind or the names of the local gods. Today she is teaching them a different language, the language of memory. She tells them of Phoenicia. As she speaks, you can almost see the world she conjures in the air around them. She describes the great city of Tyre, with its harbor so full of cedarwood ships that their masts looked like a forest rising from the water. She tells them about the scent of the famous purple dye, a rich royal color that stained the hands of the workers and the waters of the port. To her sons, who know only the white stone of Crete and the deep blue of its sea, a purple world sounds like a dream. She draws maps in the sand with a stick, sketching the layout of a city they will never see. Here, she says, her voice soft, with a longing that has no sharp edges anymore, was the great market where merchants from Egypt and Babylon would trade spices and silks. Minos, ever serious, watches the lines in the sand, trying to understand a place that exists only in his mother's voice. She sings for them not the wild hymns of the Cretan shepherds, but the soft, lilting songs her own mother used to sing. The melodies are foreign, the words strange, but the feeling is universal. It is the sound of love of home, of a life that is now a ghost. Her sons listen, their heads tilted, captivated, not by the meaning, but by the music in their mother's eyes. You realize as you watch this quiet lesson that she is not doing this for herself. The pain of remembering is still there, a dull ache behind her ribs. She is doing it for them. She is giving them a past, a history that stretches beyond this island. She is planting the seeds of a legacy in their minds, so they know they are not just the sons of a god, but also the grandsons of a Phoenician king. They are boys of two worlds, and she is the bridge between them. You watch as the years pass. Her sons are no longer toddlers, but young boys, their laughter echoing in the olive grove. And you notice another change in Europa. The quiet resignation has been replaced by a gentle, steady purpose. She is no longer just living on this island. She is beginning to build a life. It starts with small things. You see her clearing a small patch of earth near her stone dwelling, her hands digging into the rich, dark soil of Crete. She begins a garden. She plants herbs for cooking and healing, but among them she plants a few flowers whose seeds she carried unknowingly in the folds of her old Phoenician robes. They are small, foreign blossoms, and when they bloom, They are a splash of a color that doesn't quite belong here, a quiet act of remembrance. Inside her home, she no longer leaves the stone walls bare. She arranges the shells her sons collect in patterns on the ledges, spirals, and waves that mimic the designs she remembers from the temples of Astarte. She finds clay by the riverbed, and with patient hands, shapes it into simple pots and bowls. Their forms are Cretan, but the faint lines she carves into them are Phoenician. She is blending her two worlds, creating something new from the pieces of her past. One day, you see her weaving on a simple loom. For weeks, she has been gathering tiny sea snails from the shore, crushing their shells to create a dye, just as the workers did in Tyre. The color is not the deep royal purple of her father's court, but a soft, muted lavender. She takes a single thread of this precious color and weaves it into a plain linen cloth. It is a line of memory, a whisper of a lost kingdom, now a part of the fabric of her new home. As she hangs the cloth over the window, the simple stone dwelling is transformed. It is no longer a shelter. It is not a cage. It is a home, a place made not just of Cretan stone and earth, but of Phoenician memory and a woman's quiet, resilient will. She is no longer just a princess who was taken. She is a founder building a new world, one thread, one stone, one memory at a time. You notice over time that she is no longer alone. The native people of Crete, the quiet shepherds and fishermen who had watched her from a distance with wary eyes, begin to draw closer. It does not happen all at once. It happens in small, quiet gestures. One morning, you see her find a large, silver-scaled fish left on a flat stone near her door, a silent offering from a fisherman who had passed before dawn. Another day, an old shepherd leaves a skin of fresh goat's milk hanging from the branch of an olive tree in her grove. They do not ask for anything in return. They do not speak to her directly. These are not acts of tribute to a conqueror, but gifts of respect to a woman they have come to see as part of the island's sacred landscape. She accepts these gifts with a quiet grace. You watch her leave a small, intricately woven cloth on the same stone where the fish was left, a silent thank you. She offers a smiling nod to the shepherds she passes on the hills. There is no shared language between them yet, but there is a shared understanding. They see in her not a lost princess, but a wise woman. They see her son strong and bright, and they see a future. They begin to speak of her in their own tongue. The whispers carry on the wind from their small villages to her quiet shore. They do not call her Europa. They call her by a title that means the Great Mother, or the Lady of the Shore. It is a name born of reverence, not of royal decree. When they see her, they bow their heads slightly, not with the stiff formality of a court, but with a deep, natural respect. Europa feels this shift. She is no longer an outsider. She is becoming the heart of this small, growing community. The loneliness that once defined her is now being filled with a new and heavy warmth, the warmth of belonging, of responsibility. She looks at the simple, sun-weathered faces of the islanders, and for the first time, she sees not strangers, but her people. She has not claimed a throne. A throne has been given to her, built not of gold, but of trust. On clear nights when the air is cool and the only sound is the distant sigh of the sea, you see her lead her sons out of their stone home to look at the sky. In Phoenicia, her father had taught her the names of the stars, the great celestial maps that guided their ships and marked their seasons. She knew the sky of her homeland as well as she knew her own name. But this sky is different. You watch as her eyes scan the vast dark expanse, searching for familiar patterns. The constellations are here, but they are tilted, rearranged, as if the heavens themselves have shifted. The great bear she knew now hangs lower on the horizon. The warrior's belt she once used to find her way home is now a stranger in a different part of the sky. For a moment, the feeling of being utterly lost returns, a dizzying sense that not even the stars are the same. She is unmoored, adrift in a cosmos that does not recognize her. Then her gaze finds the moon. It is a constant, a familiar silver face that has watched over her in both worlds. The same moon that shone on the cedar forests of her home now bathes the olive groves of Crete in its gentle light. It is a silent silver thread connecting her past to her present, and you see her take a slow, calming breath. She points a finger towards a cluster of glittering lights. "That one," she says to Minos, her voice a soft whisper in the night, "is the great shepherd. My grandmother told me he guides lost lambs back to their mothers." She is not teaching him the Greek names for the stars. She is giving him hers. She weaves the stories of her lost home into the fabric of this new sky, creating a new map for her sons, one made of both what is and what was. She is no longer just looking at a foreign sky. She is claiming it. By telling her stories, by naming the stars, she is grounding herself, finding her place, not just on this island, but in the universe once more. She sees that these stars, the ones that once seemed so cold and distant, will be the lights that watch over her son's kingdom. And she, Europa, will be the one to teach them how to read their meaning. For a long time, Europa's world on Crete was one of solitude, nature, and the unseen presence of the divine. Zeus provided for her, the earth fed her, and her sons gave her purpose. But you notice a new chapter beginning, one not defined by gods, but by mortals. It starts with an old woman, a shepherdess, from a nearby village, whose face is a map of wrinkles and whose hands are as gnarled as the olive trees she tends. She approaches Europa one afternoon, not with fear or awe, but with a simple, quiet curiosity. She sees Europa trying to spin the tough Cretan wool on her simple loom, her movement still hesitant and foreign. Without a word, the old woman sits beside her. She takes the wool and the spindle from Europa's hands, and with a gentle touch, she guides her fingers, showing her the ancient rhythm of the island's weavers. Her touch is warm, human, and asks for nothing. They do not share a language. They speak through smiles and gestures. The old woman points to a nearby herb, and then to her own stomach, signaling that it soothes an ache. She shows Europa how to grind barley more finely, how to read the patterns of the goat herds on the hills. It is a slow, silent sharing of knowledge, passed from one woman to another. In these moments, you see Europa's loneliness begin to truly heal. The love of a god is a vast and overwhelming thing, like the sun or the sea. But the kindness of another mortal is something different. It is a small, warm fire you can sit beside. It is a shared cup of water. It is the simple recognition in another person's eyes that says, "I see you." When the old woman leaves, she presses the small, worn wooden spindle into Europa's hand. It is a simple tool worth nothing in the markets of Phoenicia. But as Europa holds its smooth, familiar weight, you see that it is the most precious treasure she has received on this island. It is the first gift that was not from a god, and it is the first thing that makes her feel not like a myth, but like a woman among women once more. You watch as her small home by the sea becomes something more than a shelter. It becomes a center. The islanders who once left gifts in silence now come to her with their disputes. They bring her their worries, their arguments over fishing spots, their disagreements over stray goats. They come to her not because she is a princess of a foreign land, but because she listens with a stillness they have come to trust. One day, two shepherds stand before her in the olive grove, their faces hard with anger. They are arguing over a boundary line, a patch of grazing land that both claim as their own. They do not shout. They stand before her and speak their cases in low, tense voices. You see, Europa listened to each man without interruption. She does not look at them with the authority of a judge, but with the calm, steady gaze of someone who understands the land. She does not consult ancient laws or royal decrees. She looks at the mountain, at the way the sunlight falls across the valley in the late afternoon. She points to a great ancient stone one that has stood on the hillside for 1,000 years. "Let the stone decide, Mère," she says, her voice quiet but clear. "Where its shadow falls at noon, that is the line. The sun is a witness that does not lie." The shepherds look at the stone, then at her, and then at each other. They nod. The judgment is simple. It is fair, and it is rooted in the wisdom of the island itself. They bow their heads and leave in peace. In that moment you see it settle upon her, an invisible weight, a crown she never asked for but now must wear. She is no longer just a mother, a survivor, or the beloved of a god. She is a queen. Her authority comes not from a bloodline they know or a throne she sits upon, but from the respect she has earned. She looks down at her own hands, no longer the soft hands of a princess, but the hands of a woman who now holds the fragile peace of a people. The crown is invisible, but it is heavier than any gold. You see her sons grow into young men. Rhadamanthus is just and fair. Sarpedon is bold and adventurous, but it is Minos who commands attention without ever asking for it. He is quiet, serious, his mind always working, always building. Europa watches him, and a new kind of worry, a faint and cold whisper, begins to stir in her heart. She sees him on the beach, not skipping stones or chasing crabs, but arranging pebbles into complex, winding patterns, mazes. He draws them in the sand with a stick, his brow furrowed in concentration, creating intricate pathways with only one entrance and no clear exit. He is not playing. He is designing. He is creating systems of perfect, inescapable order. One night, you see Europa wake from a dream, a single gasp escaping her lips. She does not remember the details, only the feeling. The feeling of a deep, hollow space beneath the earth of stone walls that twist and turn, and at the center of it all, a roar that is not quite animal and not quite human. She feels a profound and ancient sorrow, a grief for something that has not yet happened. She looks at Minos, now a young man, with the eyes of a king, and she sees the god in him more clearly than ever. But it is not the wild, passionate divinity of Zeus. It is something else, something colder, more logical, a mind that sees the world as a system to be controlled, a puzzle to be solved. She sees the shadow of a labyrinth in his eyes. She knows then, with a mother's intuition, that is older than any oracle, that the kingdom her son will build will be great. It will be a marvel of order and power. But she also knows it will have a dark, hidden center, a secret kept in a maze of stone, a sorrow that she, his mother, brought to this island on the back of a white bull. And for the first time she wonders if the god who brought her here was giving her a new life, or simply using her to begin a new tragedy. You watch her now, years later. The sun is setting, casting a warm, golden light over the olive groves. Europa is sitting on the cliffs overlooking the same sea that once seemed like an endless expanse of sorrow. Her sons, now young men, are sparring with wooden swords on the beach, below their laughter carried up to her on the evening breeze. She is no longer the lost girl who was brought here against her will. She is the queen of this island, a matriarch whose quiet wisdom has earned the devotion of its people. She looks down at her hands. They are not the soft, pale hands of the Phoenician princess she once was. They are weathered by the sun, calloused from gardening and weaving strong from raising 3 sons who are part god. She traces the lines on her palm, and for the first time sees them not as signs of hardship, but as a map of the life she has built here. A life she never chose, but a life that is now undeniably hers. A gentle smile touches her lips. It is not a smile of pure joy, for a part of her will always belong to the cedar-scented shores of her childhood. It is a smile of acceptance, a quiet, profound peace that has settled in her soul. She has learned that home is not always the place you are from, but the place you create. She has built a home here from memory, from hope, and from the love she has for her children. The sorrow for her past is still there, a soft, bittersweet ache, like a half-forgotten song. But it no longer consumes her. It is simply a part of her, a quiet shadow, that makes the light of her present life seem even warmer. She is no longer looking back at Phoenicia, or forward into the mists of her sons' futures. She is here in this moment, listening to the waves, feeling the warmth of the last sunlight on her skin, and hearing the laughter of her children. She is Europa of Crete, and that is enough. It is more than enough. It is peace. You watch her as she stands on the highest cliff of the island, looking not east towards her lost home, but west across the vast and empty expanse of the Mediterranean. A traveler, or perhaps a whisper from Zeus himself, has brought her a strange and unbelievable piece of news. The great uncharted lands that lie in that direction, the lands of the setting sun, are beginning to be called by a new name. Her name, Europe. She tries to imagine it, a continent, a world of forests, mountains, and rivers she will never see, all bearing the name of a girl who once played with flowers on a Phoenician shore. The thought is too large, too heavy. It is a crown far heavier than the one she wears as Queen of Crete. It is a destiny she could never have imagined. She thinks back to the white bull, to the journey across the sea. She had thought it was a personal story, a tale of one god's desire and one woman's fate. But now she understands it was something more. It was the beginning of a new map, a journey that carried not just a princess, but the seed of a new world from the old lands of the East to the new lands of the West. Her personal loss. Her private grief has become a founding myth for millions of people who will never know her face. They will speak her name live on her lands and build empires under her sky, all without knowing the story of the quiet queen who learned to find peace on a small rocky island. You see a profound sadness in her eyes, but also a sense of cosmic peace. Her life is no longer her own. It belongs to the story, to the wind that blows west across the sea. She will never set foot on that continent. Her world is this island, this sea, these olive groves. But she knows as she turns back towards her home that her journey did not end on this shore. It was only the beginning of a story far larger than her own life. You see her kingdom grow, not with stone walls or armies, but with people. More families begin to build their simple homes near her dwelling by the sea. The community is no longer just a scattering of shepherds. It is a village, and she is its heart. The people come to her not only with their disputes, but with their questions about the future. How should we store grain for the winter? Where should we build a new well? How do we teach our children the stories of this land? Europa does not give them laws carved in stone. Her laws are principles taught through action and quiet conversation. You see her showing them how to build small irrigation channels from the river, a technique she remembers from the fertile lands of Phoenicia, adapted for the drier Cretan soil. When two families argue over a plot of land, she does not decree a verdict. She invites them to share a meal, to break bread made from the same earth, and to find a solution rooted in community, not ownership. She sits with the women at their looms. Her fingers, once accustomed to fine Phoenician thread, now working with the rough, strong wool of Cretan sheep. She shows them patterns from her homeland spirals, representing the seabirds, representing freedom, and they in turn show her the island's ancient symbols. Together, they weave cloths that are a new language, a blend of two worlds. She is not a conqueror imposing her ways. She is a weaver, carefully intertwining her past with their present. Her leadership is defined by a gentle, steady kindness. She remembers what it is to be a stranger, to be afraid to be alone. And so she rules with empathy. Her kingdom is built not on fear, but on the shared understanding that everyone deserves a place to feel safe. It is a kingdom built of clay, of wool, of shared meals and stories, told under the stars. It is a soft kingdom, but it is strong-rooted in the very earth it stands upon. You see her much later in her life. Her hair is streaked with silver now, and her sons are tall and strong, the undisputed rulers of the island. Her kingdom is peaceful, prosperous, a small jewel of civilization in the heart of the sea. But sometimes, in the quiet moments of the evening, you see her walk to the cliffs and look west, and you know she is thinking of the name, her name. The word Europe has followed her, a persistent and ghostly echo. It is a name she hears in the whispers of sailors who visit her shores, a name she sees in the eyes of travelers who look at her with a strange, mythic awe. She has become more than a queen. She has become a legend in her own lifetime. But you can see the weight of it. Sometimes, when she is alone, she whispers her own name, Europa. and it sounds foreign to her. It is the name of a girl who no longer exists, and the name of a continent she will never see. It is a vast and heavy thing to carry. She imagines the endless forests, the great rivers, the mountains capped with snow, all of it bearing her name, all of it a world away. She feels a loneliness that is profound and unique to be the mother of a world that will never know you. To escape the weight of the myth, she grounds herself in the small, real things of her island. You see her run her fingers through a bowl of freshly harvested barley, its texture solid and certain. You watch her listen to the sound of a potter's wheel, shaping the red Cretan clay into a familiar, useful form. She finds her peace not in her grand legacy, but in the tangible world she has built. The laughter of her grandchildren, the scent of bread baking the warmth of the sun on the stone paths of her home. The myth of Europa can belong to the world, but her life, her joy, her quiet sorrows, those belong here on this island. She has learned to live with the echo of her own name, a name that is both a memory of a lost girl and a promise of a world she will never know. You see her, in her final years, a woman whose hair is as white as the sea foam on the shore. Her kingdom on Crete is a marvel of peace. There are no great armies, no high walls built for war. There are villages filled with the sound of potters' wheels, the scent of baking bread, and the laughter of children playing in the sun-drenched squares. Fishermen mend their nets by the harbor, their songs carrying on the breeze. It is a kingdom built not on power, but on the gentle principles of fairness and community that she brought with her from her memories of home. Her son Minos rules now. He is a just and powerful king, admired for his wisdom and his unyielding sense of order. He has expanded Crete's influence, not through conquest, but through trade, his ships carrying the island's fine pottery and rich olive oil to distant lands. Europa watches him, and her heart is filled with a deep pride. She has built this peace, this prosperity. It is her legacy. But sometimes, as she watches Minos dispense justice, she sees a flicker of something else in his eyes, a cold, hard logic that is more divine than human. She sees the unbending will of his father Zeus, a will that demands perfection and has little room for mercy. She remembers her dream of the labyrinth, the whisper of a roar from deep within the earth. And a quiet sorrow settles over her. She has given her children a kingdom of peace, but she cannot give them a peaceful destiny. She knows the blood of the gods runs strong in them, and the stories of the gods are always written in passion, tragedy, and conflict. As she looks out at the calm blue sea, she imagines a future she will not live to see. A future where a monster is born from pride, where a labyrinth is built to hide a terrible secret, and where black-sailed ships will one day arrive from Athens, bringing a hero to challenge the world her son has created. Her journey began with a god in the form of a bull, and she fears her legacy will end with a monster in the form of a bull as well. The peace she built is beautiful, but she knows with the sad wisdom of a long life that it is fragile, and that even the most beautiful things are eventually broken. You watch her as her sons grow, and you see that they are three different worlds orbiting the same sun. Minos, you have seen, is a boy of order and shadow, his mind already building the foundations of a kingdom. But her other sons, Rhadamanthus and Sarpedon, are born of a different light. Rhadamanthus is the quiet one, the observer. You see him not with the other boys as they practice with wooden swords, but sitting with the old men of the village, listening to their stories. He has a gentle gravity about him, a sense of fairness that is so pure it is almost painful. When children argue over a game, it is Rhadamanthus they turn to, for he listens to both sides before speaking, and his judgment is always kind. In him, Europa sees not the fire of a god, but the deep, steady heart of a just man. It comforts her. Sarpedon is different still. He is the wind. You see him climbing the highest cliffs, his hair wild, his eyes always fixed on the horizon. He is not interested in rules or gardens. He is interested in what lies beyond. He asks his mother about the ships that sometimes pass in the far distance, about the lands they come from, about the stories they carry. In him, Europa sees her own lost adventurous spirit, but untainted by sorrow. He is a wanderer, a dreamer, and his energy is as boundless as the sea he longs to cross. She loves them all, but she worries for them in different ways. She worries for Minos's cold ambition, for Rhadamanthus's gentle heart, in a world that is not always kind, and for Sarpedon's restless soul that may one day carry him too far from home. She knows she has mothered three great destinies: a king, a judge, and an adventurer. And all she can do is give them this small island of peace, this quiet moment in time, before the world comes to claim them. You see that her kingdom can no longer be contained in a simple dwelling by the sea. As her sons become men and the community around her grows, a new structure begins to rise from the earth. It is not a fortress, but a home for a people, the first palace of Crete. It is built by the hands of the islanders, the shepherds, the fishermen, and the farmers she now calls her own. They quarry the pale, honey-colored stone from the hills and raise the walls with a slow, steady rhythm. Europa is there every day, not as a distant ruler giving commands, but as a quiet guide. You see her showing the builders where to place a large window to catch the morning light, or how to design a central courtyard so the sea breeze can flow through its halls. She wants a palace that breathes, a place that does not shut out the wild beauty of the island, but invites it in. When the walls are plastered, she does something that no one on the island has ever seen before. She begins to paint them. She mixes pigments from ground minerals, from crushed flowers, from the rich red earth itself. She teaches the local artisans how to paint on the wet plaster, and the images that emerge are not of war or conquest. They are of life. You watch as a pod of dolphins, fluid and joyful, leaps across a blue wall. You see bulls adorned not with armor, but with garlands of saffron flowers. Women with long, flowing hair dance in fields of lilies. It is a world of peace, of motion, of a deep reverence for nature. She is taking the beauty she has found in her solitude and giving it back to her people, making it a permanent part of their home. This is not a palace built to intimidate. It is a palace built to celebrate. And in its sunlit rooms and open halls, you can see the soul of its queen, resilient, graceful, and forever connected to the sea. You see her now in this twilight of her life, an old woman with eyes that hold the wisdom of two worlds. She is sitting in the central courtyard of the palace, a grandchild playing quietly at her feet. The air is still and warm, filled with the scent of night-blooming jasmine from the garden she planted decades ago. All is at peace. A soft breeze rustles the leaves, and the sound for a moment reminds her of something else. A song, a simple lullaby her mother used to sing to her in Phoenicia, a song about the stars returning home to the sea. She closes her eyes and tries to summon it. The melody is there, a faint and fragile echo in the back of her mind. She begins to hum her voice, a soft, reedy whisper. She remembers the first few words, the feeling of safety they brought, the memory of her mother's hand on her hair. But as she tries to recall the second verse, the words slip away. The melody falters, becomes uncertain, and then dissolves into silence. She tries again, but the thread is broken. It is gone. A piece of her past, a sound she thought was etched into her soul, has finally been worn away by time. You see a look of profound, gentle sadness cross her face. It is not the sharp grief of her youth, but the quiet sorrow of knowing that some things once lost can never be reclaimed. She has built a new world, a new home, a new life. But the price was the slow, inevitable fading of the old one. The song is now just a feeling, a memory of a memory. Her grandchild looks up and asks what she was humming. Europa smiles and simply shakes her head, placing a finger on the child's lips. She cannot teach him a song she no longer remembers. But as she looks at his young, curious face, she knows that new songs are being written now here on this island. Songs in a different language, with a different rhythm. And she was the first note. You see her one last time. She is very old now. Her movements slow, her body frail. but her eyes still hold the quiet light of a Cretan sky. She walks alone along the shore, the same shore where she first arrived as a frightened girl so many years ago. The sand is warm beneath her bare feet. The sea is calm, its surface like a sheet of polished glass. She leans over a shallow tide pool, trapped between the rocks, and looks at her reflection. She does not see the face of the young Phoenician princess she once was. She sees a woman with skin weathered by 1,000 suns, with hair as white as salt, and with eyes that hold the deep, calm wisdom of a long life lived with both sorrow and grace. She smiles at this stranger, who is herself. There is no regret, only a profound sense of peace. In the reflection, for just a moment, she sees the image of a great white bull, its form shimmering in the water. But there is no fear. The memory is no longer a wound. It is a story whose ending she now understands. The bull was not a monster that stole her away. It was a divine guide that brought her home, to the only home she was ever truly meant to have. She lies down on the warm sand, her back against a smooth, sun-bleached rock. She closes her eyes and listens. She hears the gentle whisper of the waves, a sound that is now as familiar and comforting as her own breath. In the distance, she can hear the faint sound of her grandchildren's laughter, carried on the breeze from the palace she helped build. It is the music of her kingdom, the music of her life. Her journey, which began with the roar of the sea, ends with its gentle whisper. She came to this island as a captive, and she leaves it as its soul. Her breath slows, sinking with the rhythm of the tide, until it is impossible to tell one from the other. Years have passed. Crete is no longer just a peaceful island. It is a powerful kingdom, its influence stretching across the Aegean Sea. It is ruled by Minos, the son of Europa and Zeus. The simple palace of clay and kindness has grown into a sprawling, magnificent structure at Knossos, its walls alive with frescoes of leaping dolphins and dancing youths. But the kingdom's heart holds a shadow, a secret born of divine pride and human shame. And now you see another man standing before the king. He is an artist named Daedalus, an exile from Athens, a genius whose hands can shape wood, stone, and metal into wonders. He is summoned to the great hall where King Minos sits upon a throne of polished cedar. Minos is no longer the curious boy drawing patterns in the sand. He is a king whose eyes hold the cold, clear logic of a god. He does not ask, he commands. "I have a task for you, Daedalus." The king says, his voice as calm and steady as the sea on a windless day. "I need you to build something for me, a prison, but not a prison of bars and chains. I want a prison of thought, a maze of stone and shadow so complex that whatever enters it can never find its way out." Daedalus, the great inventor, feels a chill, despite the warmth of the hall. He sees the king's vision, not a building, but a puzzle made real, a structure that thinks a trap designed to hold not just a body, but a secret. He understands that he is not being asked to create a monument, but to build a tomb for something that is still alive. He looks into the king's unblinking eyes and sees the same divine fire that his mother Europa once saw in the white bull, the fire of creation, but also of destruction. Daedalus knows he cannot refuse. The greatest artist of his time has just been commanded to build his masterpiece, and he knows with a deep and hollow certainty that it will also be his greatest regret. You see him at work, but it is not the joyful work of an artist creating beauty. Daedalus oversees the construction of the labyrinth in a valley shrouded by hills away from the prying eyes of the court at Knossos. The work is done in a strange, heavy silence. The clang of hammers is muffled. The voices of the workers are low, as if they know they are building something that should not be spoken of. Daedalus moves like a ghost among the rising walls. His genius, once used to create soaring wings and clever toys, is now turned to a darker purpose. You watch him sketch the plans on clay tablets, not with the fluid lines of a leaping dolphin, but with the cold, precise geometry of a spider's web. He designs corridors that twist back on themselves, stairways that lead to dead ends, and rooms that have no doors. He is creating a building that is a lie, a place that actively works to deceive the mind and break the spirit. He feels the cold stone beneath his hands, each block laid with perfect precision. He admires the flawless logic of his own creation, the inescapable patterns, the perfect trap. But with each new corridor he completes, a part of his soul grows colder. He is using his art not to liberate, but to confine. He is building a masterpiece of despair. The workers do not look him in the eye. They do their work and go home, their faces empty. They know better than to ask what this place is for. They can feel it in the air, in the way the shadows cling to the walls, even at midday. They are building a place for a secret to be buried. When the final stone is laid, Daedalus stands alone at the entrance, a single dark opening in a sea of twisting walls. The labyrinth is complete. It is perfect. And as he looks into its silent, waiting darkness, he realizes he has not just built a prison for a monster. He has built a monument to a king's shame and a tomb for his own genius. You watch on a moonless night as the king's secret is finally given its home. A small, solemn procession moves from the palace to the labyrinth, shrouded in darkness and silence. You do not see the creature clearly, only a large, stumbling shadow, half man, half beast, guided by guards with downcast eyes. It is the Minotaur, the child of a queen's shame and a god's curse. He is led to the dark entrance of the maze, and the great stone door is rolled into place behind him. The sound is heavy, final. Daedalus is in his workshop, trying to busy his hands with new inventions, trying to forget the perfect, terrible thing he has built. But then he hears it. A sound that carries on the night wind, a sound unlike any other. It is not the roar of a simple beast full of anger and aggression. It is a sound of profound and utter loneliness. A cry of confusion from a creature that does not understand its own nature, trapped in a world designed to break it. The roar echoes from the heart of the maze, its sound bent and twisted by the winding corridors Daedalus himself designed. He had calculated the acoustics, the way sound would travel and die within the stone walls. He had designed it to contain a sound, and now he is forced to listen to the result of his own genius. He covers his ears, but the sound is not in the air. It is in the stone, in the earth, in his own bones. He knows he will hear that lonely roar in his dreams for the rest of his life. The king's secret is now buried, but its voice will never be silent. And Daedalus, the great creator, feels a terrible pity, not for a monster, but for a prisoner whose cage he so perfectly built. The labyrinth was complete. The king's secret was safe, hidden away in a maze of stone and shadow. King Minos was pleased, but the king had one last loose end. The man who knew the secret. The man who designed the inescapable prison. The man who could, if he chose, reveal its path to the world. You see Daedalus, not long after his masterpiece is finished, being led by royal guards. They do not take him to a dungeon. King Minos is not so crude. He knows the value of a genius. Instead, Daedalus and his young son Icarus are escorted to a tall, comfortable tower overlooking the sea. It is a gilded cage with fine food, soft beds, and a workshop full of tools. But the doors are locked from the outside. Daedalus spends his days at the highest window of the tower. From here, he can see his creation sprawling below the perfect, maddening geometry of the labyrinth. He can trace its winding paths with his eyes, every turn and dead end a testament to his own brilliance. And every night, when the wind is right, he can still hear it, the faint, muffled roar of the lonely creature trapped within, the sound of his own guilt. He watches his son Icarus grow up in this beautiful prison, a boy who knows only the view from a high window and the sound of a distant, unseen sorrow. Daedalus's heart aches with a regret deeper than any maze. His genius, the very thing that had brought him fame, had now become his curse. He had built a prison for a monster, and in doing so had trapped himself and his innocent son. He looks out at the sea, the endless blue that separates him from his home in Athens. He watches the gulls soaring on the wind, their wings catching the updrafts with effortless grace. They are free, And in that moment, as you watch him, you see an idea begin to form in his eyes. A desperate, brilliant, and dangerous idea. If he cannot escape by land or by sea, then perhaps he will escape by air. You see the great artist begin his final, most desperate creation. He starts by gathering feathers. Every day as he walks the open rooftop of his tower prison, he collects the feathers of gulls and pigeons that have fallen there. The guards watch him amused. They think it is the sad hobby of a mad old man, a way to pass the endless empty hours. They do not understand that they are watching the beginning of an escape. At night, by the light of a single sputtering candle, he works in secret. You watch as he sorts the feathers by size, by shape, by strength. He lays them out on the stone floor, arranging them into the shape of a great bird's wing. His hands, the same hands that designed the cold, perfect geometry of the labyrinth, are now working with a new and gentle precision. He is not commanding stone anymore. He is learning from nature. He uses linen thread to tie the smaller feathers together at their base. He melts beeswax from the candles to bind the larger, stronger ones, layering them one by one, creating a structure that is both light and resilient. His son Icarus watches him, his initial confusion turning into a wide-eyed, breathless wonder. He is watching his father build a miracle. This is not the work of a cold architect. It is the work of a hopeful father. Every feather he places is a prayer. Every thread he ties is an act of love. He is not building a cage. He is building a key to the sky itself. After weeks, perhaps months of this secret, painstaking labor, the first wing is complete. Daedalus holds it up in the moonlight that streams through the window. It is a fragile, beautiful, impossible thing, a whisper of freedom made of wax and feathers, and a father's desperate love. The labyrinth below may hold them to the earth, but Daedalus has just built a way to touch the sky. You see them now, standing on the highest ledge of the tower, the two pairs of wings gleaming in the morning sun. They are finished, a marvel of ingenuity and hope. Daedalus carefully fits the smaller pair onto his son's shoulders, his hands trembling slightly as he fastens the leather straps. He looks into Icarus's eyes, which are bright with excitement and fear. "Listen to me, my son Daedalus," says his voice low and serious. "The path to freedom is a narrow one. Do not fly too low, or the dampness from the sea will weigh down your feathers. And do not fly too high, or the sun will melt the wax that holds them. Follow me closely. Stay in the middle path." Icarus nods, but his gaze is already on the open sky, on the impossible freedom that awaits. Daedalus then fits his own wings, feeling their strange, unfamiliar weight. He takes a deep breath, and with a shared look of desperate hope they leap. For a terrifying moment they fall. The wind screams past them, the sea rushes up to meet them. But then, with an awkward, powerful flap, the wings catch the air. They are no longer falling, they are flying. The feeling is one of sheer, unbelievable exhilaration. Icarus laughs a sound of pure joy that is carried away by the wind. He soars and swoops, reveling in a freedom he has only ever dreamed of. Daedalus watches him, his heart a mixture of pride and a deep, gnawing anxiety. He calls out, reminding him of the middle path, but his voice is small against the vastness of the sky. The island of Crete shrinks below them, the labyrinth now just a faint, toy-like pattern on the ground. They are free. But the freedom of the open sky is an intoxicating thing, especially for a boy who has only ever known the walls of a tower. Icarus, lost in the pure joy of being weightless, of seeing the world spread out beneath him like a painted map, begins to forget his father's warning. He feels the sun on his face, warm and inviting, and he is drawn to it. He wants to feel its full embrace. He begins to climb higher, his powerful young arms beating the wings with a strength born of exhilaration. He soars above his father, laughing a sound that is quickly swallowed by the vast, empty blue. Daedalus calls out to him, his voice filled with a sudden sharp fear, but Icarus is too high, too lost in his own glorious flight to hear. Then Daedalus sees it, a single small feather detaching from his son's wing and spiraling slowly down through the empty air. His heart freezes. He shouts again, his voice now a raw cry of panic. But it is too late. The sun's heat has softened the wax. More feathers peel away, fluttering uselessly in the wind. Icarus feels his wings give way, his soaring ascent turning into a clumsy, frantic struggle. You see him tumble from the sky, a boy with borrowed wings, reaching for a father who cannot save him. Daedalus can only watch in helpless horror as his son falls a small, dark shape against the bright, indifferent sun. He hears one last fading cry across the wind, "Father," and then a small, distant splash in the endless sea below. Daedalus circles the empty sky, his own wings now feeling like a terrible heavy burden. He has escaped his prison, but the price was his son. His genius has given him freedom, and it has taken everything from him. He has outsmarted a king and built a labyrinth of stone, but he could not save his boy from the simple, terrible law of the sun. You see him land clumsy and heartbroken on the shore of a small, unnamed island. He stumbles as his feet touch the sand, the great wings collapsing around him. The sky is empty now. The laughter is gone. There is only the sound of the waves, a sound that now feels like a taunt. He is free, but he is utterly alone. He walks along the water's edge for hours, his eyes scanning the horizon, searching for any sign of his son. But there is nothing. Only a few white feathers that wash ashore, delicate and useless, clinging to the wet sand like ghosts. Each one is a small, perfect dagger in his heart. With a cry of pure anguish, a sound that is half grief and half rage, he tears the wings from his own back, the masterpiece of his genius. The invention that gave him the sky now feels like a curse. He does not want the freedom it gave him. He wants his son. You watch as he digs a shallow grave in the sand and buries the wings, a final, desperate act of renouncing the pride that led to this sorrow. He looks around at the deserted island, at the vast, indifferent sea that took his boy. He knows he can never bring him back, but he can give him a name. He calls the island Icaria. He calls the sea that surrounds it the Icarian Sea. It is a quiet, lonely monument built of memory and regret. He has escaped the king's labyrinth of stone, only to find himself trapped in a new labyrinth of grief, one with no walls and no exit. He is free, and he has never been more of a prisoner. The story of Europa is often told with a sharp edge, a tale of abduction of a god's selfish desire and of a princess stolen from her home. It is remembered as an act of violation, a myth that begins with a cry of fear as the shores of Phoenicia disappear behind the waves. That version of the story is not wrong, but it is incomplete. It focuses on the storm, but misses the quiet calm that follows. It remembers the bull, but it forgets the woman. Tonight, we have seen that differently. Through the quiet moments, we have witnessed not just a kidnapping, but a journey of profound transformation. The white bull was not merely a disguise. It was a vessel of destiny. It carried not just a girl, but the seed of a new civilization, from the ancient sun-baked lands of the East to the green, fertile shores of a world that was not yet born. It was the beginning of a map, the first step in a story that would one day be called Western civilization. The myth was not about an ending, but about a founding. And Europa in this story was not simply a passive victim. After the fear, after the sorrow, she did not just endure, she created. You saw her build a home from memory, a community from kindness, and a dynasty from the children she raised under a foreign sky. She could not choose her fate, but she chose how to meet it. She learned the language of the wind, the rhythm of the waves, and the wisdom of the ancient olive trees. She transformed her exile into a kingdom, her loneliness into a quiet strength. She became a queen not by birthright or by conquest, but by earning the trust of the land and its people. Her story whispers a timeless question to us even now in the stillness of our own rooms. What makes a home? Is it the place where you were born? The soil that holds your ancestors? Or is it the place where you learn to plant your own garden, where you tell your stories to your children, where your heart finally finds a place to rest. Europa teaches us that home is not always a place we can return to. Sometimes it is a place we build inside ourselves, piece by piece, memory by memory, until the foreign land begins to feel like it was always waiting for us. She was a piece in a grand game played by gods, a mortal woman swept up in a divine plan she could never fully comprehend. Her life was shaped by forces far beyond her control, by the whim of Zeus, by the prophecy of a continent that would bear her name. And yet, even within that grand cosmic design, you saw her carve out her own quiet spaces of freedom. The peace of the olive grove, the stories she chose to tell her sons, the simple act of weaving a single purple thread into her loom. She could not control her destiny, but she chose how to live within it, with grace, with resilience, and with a dignity that no god could give or take away. And in the end, her name belongs not just to her, but to a world she never saw. A continent of millions who carry her name without knowing the story of the lonely princess who learned to read the wind on a small Cretan shore. Her personal journey, full of sorrow and acceptance, became the foundational myth for countless generations. Her legacy is not written in stone or gold, but in the very name of the land itself. A quiet reminder that sometimes the greatest stories begin not with a battle or a crown, but with a single unwilling step into the unknown. And so the story of Europa finds its quiet end, not with the woman, but with the world she unknowingly created. She found her peace on the island of Crete, building a small, gentle kingdom from the remnants of her past and the hope for her future. She became a queen, a mother, and a legend whose name would stretch across a continent. But the peace she cultivated could not outlast the will of the gods. The divine blood she passed on to her sons grew into a different kind of legacy. Her son Minos, the boy who once took his first steps in an olive grove, would go on to build a powerful and feared civilization. The whispers of the labyrinth she once dreamed of became real stone, a maze built to contain a monstrous secret. The beautiful island she had made her home became a place of tribute and terror. Her story, which began in sunlight, ended in shadow. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? What would you have done if you were her? When destiny carries you to a new shore and gives you a new life, but you can feel the faint cold shadow of its future, do you fight it? Do you try to change it? Or do you simply find your peace in the small, beautiful moments you can control? Her story is a quiet reminder that our lives are often larger than we know. We build things, families, homes, legacies, and we can never truly know how they will change, what stories they will tell long after we are gone. All we can do is plant the seeds of kindness in the earth we are given and hope that the roots hold true. But the shores of Crete are fading now. The scent of wild thyme and sea salt is gone. The whispers of the labyrinth are growing quiet, receding into the mists of a time long past. Europa's story is finished, at least for tonight. The journey is over. You're not there anymore. You're here, safe in your bed, in your quiet room. The only sound now is the gentle rhythm of your own breathing. In then out. There are no gods watching, no shadows of bulls in the waves. Just the stillness of the night and the soft darkness inviting you to rest. Sleep now, just sleep. You don't need to ask where she learned it. It's older than her language, older than Phoenicia. A rhythm passed from women to daughters silently with touch and gesture instead of words. And as she kneels there, a breeze rises suddenly, not strong but certain. It rustles the brush, it lifts her hair, and it carries a scent that makes her eyes open wide. Time, crushed underfoot. But no one has stepped there. You watch her look around slowly. She doesn't call out, doesn't run. She just listens, breath held. The wind moves again, and this time it carries sound. 3 short bird calls from a species she doesn't know, too rhythmic to be random. She tilts her head. And then, across the hollow, a fox appears. Not bright red, not storybook, grayish thin, half-shadowed by bush. It pauses, looks at her. Not with fear, with recognition. And then it moves on, disappears. She lets out her breath, not with surprise, not with relief, but with something like agreement. The island has spoken, not in words, not even in signs. In rhythm. And Europa heard it. You watch her sit there by the spring, her feet in the shallow trickle, the sun warming her back. She doesn't need translation. She's not asking for meaning. She's just listening. And the island, after all this time, is finally listening back. It happens by accident. You weren't expecting it. Neither was she. You follow her along the shore, the same path she's taken every day since she arrived, where the sea breaks in quiet pulses, and the stones are warm from late morning sun. She has a basket now woven from vines she pulled from the cliffs. It's not perfect, misshapen, slightly unraveling, but it holds things. Shells, pebbles, bits of driftwood she finds beautiful. Today, she's hunting for sea glass. She doesn't know the name for it, not in this land's tongue, but she knows what it feels like, edges worn soft by time and tide. She fingers each piece before placing it in the basket, as if checking for a story. You walk behind her, slow and invisible. You hear the waves. You hear the distant bleat of a goat on the cliffs above. And then she slips. One foot lands wrong on a patch of wet algae. Her arms flail the basket flies, and she lands flat on her back in a shallow tide pool with a splash and a gasp. Silence. You freeze. So does she. For a moment she just lies there, hair spread like seaweed dress, soaked through water, lapping gently at her ribs. And then she laughs. Not softly, not politely. A real laugh, sudden, full-throated. Wild. You feel it like thunder in your chest. She sits up, face dripping, hands braced behind her in the pool, and keeps laughing. Short bursts at first, then longer. She covers her mouth, then gives up and lets it echo off the rocks. It's not the laugh of someone who's gone mad. It's the laugh of someone who's remembered she is not made of glass. You see it in her face as she wipes water from her brow. That strange, defiant joy, as if she's surprised to still be here, surprised to be capable of sound. She gathers the basket, now half floating, collects her scattered treasures one by one, but she doesn't stop smiling. She walks back barefoot, dress clinging to her legs, sea glass, clinking softly with every step. And you, watching from the rocks, feel something you hadn't noticed missing. Relief. Not because she laughed, but because she could. Because the weight didn't crack her. It tilted her back, made her fall, soaked her to the bone. And she came up laughing. Later, as she hangs her dress to dry on a driftwood branch, you hear her hum again. This time, not an old song, something new. No words, just a sound carried in a salt breeze. The first breath of someone becoming someone else. She reaches the grove near midday, the heat pressing down softly, not harsh but firm, like a hand on your shoulder. The light filters through the silver-green leaves in long, trembling shafts. Shadows curl at the roots of the trees like sleeping animals. She chooses one tree, not the tallest, not the thickest, but the one with the most twisted trunk. It looks like it has been turned upon itself by wind, by time, by whatever God first coaxed it into being. You see her pause before it. She lowers her basket. Then she steps forward and rests both hands on the bark. Her palms flatten. Her brow touches the wood. She doesn't close her eyes. She whispers. You lean closer. It isn't a prayer, not exactly. It's a conversation. Soft, halting words. Not in Greek, not in Phoenician. Something in between. She speaks slowly, as if choosing her thoughts by feel like fingers moving through a bowl of river stones. You can't hear every word, but you catch pieces. I'm still here. It's been a long time. I don't know if I'm supposed to stay. The tree doesn't answer, but its leaves rustle in a wind that wasn't there a moment ago. And you see it, the way her shoulders lower, how her breath deepens. Not because she found certainty, but because she was heard. She sits at the base of the tree, the bark against her back. From her basket, she pulls a handful of crushed herbs and sprinkles them into the soil. Thyme, rosemary, a sprig of something bitter and sharp. Not an offering, a gesture. Like saying, "This is what I have, I leave it here." You watch her stay there for hours. She doesn't move, doesn't sleep, just breathes. Her fingers rest on a root like holding someone's hand. And the grove around her ancient silent breathes with her. By the time she stands again, the light has shifted. A thin line of red touches the horizon. The wind has returned warm and full of dust. She touches the tree one last time, not in farewell, in thanks. And as she walks back toward the shore, you know she is no longer a visitor here. She has spoken. And something old, something rooted, has listened. She doesn't notice it at first. The morning has its own rhythm. Now wake with the birds, drink from the spring. Gather wood or wild greens before the sun turns too harsh. Her movements are practiced, not hurried. She no longer scans the horizon for ships or signs of rescue. She watches the ground instead, listens to the trees. But when she returns to the shelter, arms full of small branches and a fistful of late summer figs, she stops short. Something's waiting. You see it too. A bundle. Small, carefully placed just beside the entrance, wrapped in broad leaves, still dewy from the morning. She crouches, hesitates, then reaches. Her fingers touch the surface, gently peel the leaves back like opening a memory sealed in silence. Inside, three things. A perfectly round stone, smooth and pale as milk. A cluster of dried berries, their scent tart and faintly sweet. And a feather dark, long-edged in silver light. You see the way her breath stills, how she turns the stone over in her palm, presses it to her cheek. Not for its value, for its texture. Then the berries, she lifts them, smells them, smiles just slightly at the scent. Last, the feather. She holds it up to the light, watching how it shifts between shadow and shine. A bird she's never seen. There's no note, no sign of who left them. But the meaning is clear. She's being watched, not with threat, with care. And the island, through its quiet hands, has left her a gift. You feel the shift inside her, not fear, not even surprise. Belonging. Not all at once, but in pieces. She lays the objects on the flat rock near her sleeping mat, arranging them with quiet reverence. Not as trophies, as reminders, reminders. That even in silence, she is not unseen. That somewhere, something recognizes her presence here, not as invasion, not as accident, but as part of the pattern. She doesn't speak, doesn't ask questions. Just sits beside them, legs folded, watching the breeze lift the corner of the leaf. Later she hums again. And this time, it's not for memory. It's for the present. The island has given her something. And she, in return, offers her voice. The sky gives no warning at first. Just a thickening in the air, a hush in the trees, a pressure behind the eyes like unshed tears. You feel it before she does, a breeze that forgets to be kind, a stillness that holds its breath too long. She is walking near the cliffs when the first wind hits sharp, sudden pulling at her shawl, like a hand that doesn't know its own strength. She stops, turns toward the sea. The horizon is no longer a line. It's a wall, charcoal gray, moving. You follow her as she walks quickly, now barefoot across warm stone, clutching her basket of herbs to her chest. The path to the shelter seems longer today, less familiar, as if the island itself is bracing for something. When she reaches her cave, the wind has already shifted. The air tastes of copper and earth. She secures what she can basket, tucked into a crevice, her small pile of reeds pressed under stone. She pulls the linen curtain she wove across the cave mouth. It flutters violently, then stills. And then it begins. Not rain, not yet. The sound. The storm speaks first in voices that come from nowhere. Low groans across the cliffs, whispers in the rocks. The trees outside strain and creak like old ships in a rising tide. Inside, she lights a fire, but the flame resists, dancing sideways, uncertain. She pulls her shawl, tighter curls, into a corner, back to the stone. Her eyes don't close. You sit beside her, close, closer than usual. You don't speak, but you imagine placing a hand over hers. Not to calm her, just to say, "I know." The rain comes like 1,000 small hands. It doesn't fall. It hammers. The shelter shakes. Somewhere above water, finds a crack in the stone and drips steadily. She watches it trace the wall like a map drawn in pain. This is the first time the island raises its voice, and she does not run. She stays. She breathes through the roar, through the shaking, through the part of her that remembers shipdecks and thunder and the white bull vanishing into the sea foam. You can almost hear her thoughts. I am not that girl anymore. Hours pass. The fire dies. The storm does not. She rests her head on her knees. Her lips move silently. Maybe a prayer, maybe not. But the island hears her. By dawn, the sky splits open. Light pours in like forgiveness. The cave drips. The air smells of wet stone and clean leaves. She emerges slowly, blinking against the brightness. Her dress is damp, her hands scratched from holding the wall all night. But she walks barefoot into the new day. Not triumphant, but unbroken. You watch her pick up a branch fallen in the storm. She turns it in her hand, testing its weight. Not for defense, for planting. She doesn't speak, but the message is clear. I'm still here. And now the island knows it too. There's a hush after a storm that feels almost sacred. You feel it now, how the air holds still, as if the world is listening for its own heartbeat. Europa steps into the light, like someone who has passed through a door no one else can see. Her feet are bare, her shoulders damp, but her back is straight. She walks inland, not toward safety, but toward openness. You follow. The grass is flattened, the branches torn, but the grove ahead still stands. The olive trees sway gently now, like old beings stretching after a long sleep. She stops in the center of the clearing and turns her face to the wind. And then she speaks. Not loudly, not like a proclamation. A whisper, soft, steady. Europa. Her name. You feel it before the air does. The vibration of self, the breath of remembering. She says it again, this time slower, letting the wind catch it, pull it through the leaves. Europa. You've heard others say her name before, priests, servants, storytellers, but never like this. This is not the name of a myth. It's the name of a girl standing in the wreckage of silence. And for the first time, she claims it, not as possession, as presence. The wind moves, not in gusts, in waves. It circles her once, then rises through the trees, lifting their silver leaves like a murmur of acknowledgement. You see her eyes close, her hands drop to her sides. She doesn't smile, she doesn't cry. She breathes. And in that breath, she teaches the island who she is. Not a captive, not a victim, not just the chosen of a god. Europa. The girl who crossed the sea, the woman who stayed. She kneels in the grass, places her palms to the earth, and whispers her name once more. The ground does not speak back, but it holds her touch. The wind does not repeat her, but it carries the syllables away into valleys and across ridgelines where no one lives. And perhaps someday someone else will hear that name on the breeze and wonder who it belongs to. But you will know. You were there. You watched her give it not to the bull, not to the sea, but to the land, to herself, to the wind. It happens on a day so ordinary it almost goes unnoticed. The air is soft heavy with late summer heat. The sky stretches wide and pale, and the sea for once does not speak. Europa is near the spring, kneeling by the rocks, washing a strip of cloth in the trickling water. Her sleeves are rolled to her elbows. The motion is slow, rhythmical, thoughtless almost. And then she stops. You feel it too. A presence. Not a sound, not yet, just the feeling that she is no longer alone. She straightens slowly, eyes still lowered. She doesn't reach for a stone or for shelter. She listens. A twig breaks, a foot shifts on loose dirt. Then a voice, soft, hesitant. Greek. A man. You watch as she rises to her feet, cloth forgotten in the water. She turns. He's older than her, a shepherd by the look of him, weathered face, simple tunic, a bundle of herbs tied to his belt. A small goat waits behind him, tethered to a twisted stick. He says her name. Not as a question, as a recognition. Europa. You wonder how he knows. But then again, names travel differently on islands, quietly, in wind, in salt, in the dreams of strangers. She says nothing at first, just watches him. Her shoulders don't tense, her feet don't step back. She has faced storms and gods. A man does not frighten her. He offers her a piece of bread, not warm, not new, but real. She takes it slowly. Their fingers do not touch. Then, after a long pause, she says something you've never heard her say aloud. Thank you. 2 words, simple. But after so much silence, they feel enormous. He nods, then speaks again. A question this time. Do you live here? She hesitates, then nods. Not with certainty, but with something close. They speak a little more, fragments of language, long pauses, a shared quiet. He does not ask about the bull, or the gods, or her past. He tells her about goats, about rain, about how the olives will come late this year. And then he leaves. No promises, no fear, no judgment. Just a glance back as he crests the hill. She stands there long after he's gone, bread in her hand, dust on her feet. You see it in her eyes, not hope, but something quieter. Connection. She returns to her shelter as the sun begins to fall. She places the bread on the flat stone near the sea glass and the white pebble. And that night, for the first time, she dreams not of what was lost, but of a voice calling her name, not to take her away, but simply to say, I see you, I know you're here. The morning comes with clouds, but no rain. The kind of sky that muffles sound, softens shadow. You can hear her footsteps before you see her light, steady moving uphill toward the grove. She carries more than usual, not just herbs or driftwood. Today she carries purpose. You know what it's about before she does. It's been 3 days since the shepherd came, 3 days since he left the bread and took nothing. Since then, no voice has echoed across the hills, no footprints near the spring, no sign that he'll return. But she feels it too, doesn't she? That someone might pass by again. And so she prepares. Not with words, not with invitation, with fire. You follow her to a small clearing just below the olive grove, half sheltered by stone, invisible from the sea. She kneels and begins to build. Not just a pile of sticks, a hearth. She lays each piece with care. Thin twigs at the center, thicker ones around. She lines the base with flat stones she's been collecting all week. There's no rush, no trembling in her hands. This is not the fire of survival. This is the fire of welcome. You watch her light it with a spark from flint and dried moss. It catches on the second try, flickering up like a secret finally whispered aloud. The smoke rises in a gentle column, thin and blue, curling into the sky. It smells of rosemary and cedar shavings. She doesn't sit close to it. She moves back, lets the warmth spread on its own. She places a flat rock nearby, just large enough to sit on. Not an altar, a place to rest. Then she leaves. Not far, just out of sight. Behind the brush, she waits. You crouch beside her. She watches the fire and waits. For an hour, maybe more, no one comes. But something happens anyway. A bird lands near the smoke, bright-throated, unafraid. It pecks at the ashes, then hops closer to the flame wings, fluttering in the rising warmth. She watches it, doesn't move. Then it lifts off, circles once, and vanishes into the trees. She exhales not with disappointment, with acceptance. The fire wasn't for someone in particular. It was for the act itself. A gesture, a signal, a door left open. She returns to the shelter at dusk, her hair dusted with ash, her fingers still scented with smoke. And even though no one sat beside it today, she will return tomorrow, and the next. Because that's what fire is, after all. A promise to the world, I'm here. If you are too, come closer. It begins in the afternoon, with air so heavy it presses against your lungs. The trees stop rustling. Even the waves seem to hold back, waiting. Europa feels it first in her hands, tiny pricks along her knuckles like invisible threads tightening. She pauses by the cliff path, one palm open to the sky. The first drop falls slow and round, landing in her palm with the softness of a tear. Then another. And then all at once, rain. Not a storm this time, just rain, steady, earthbound, intimate. She doesn't run. She stands there, eyes closed, arms loose at her sides, as if letting the sky wash something away. You watch the water soak her dress, flatten her hair, darken the stone at her feet. She looks like a statue, waking from centuries of stillness. And then, without warning, the memory comes. You feel it strike her, not like lightning, but like music. Something once buried, half remembered, rises in the scent of wet earth and distant thunder. A rooftop in Sidon, clay tiles slick beneath her sandals. A festival, orange lanterns bobbing in the breeze. The voice of her younger brother calling her name. The touch of her mother's hand on her back, guiding steady. The smell of cinnamon and new parchment. The feeling of being known. You see it in her face, not a smile, not sorrow. A return. She walks slowly toward the grove, feet squelching, in the softened earth, arms still at her sides. She doesn't try to hold on to the memory. She lets it move through her, like rain. At the base of the oldest olive tree she kneels. Water streams down her arms, pools at her collarbone. Her fingers dig into the dirt, not to plant, not to anchor, just to feel. She says nothing, but you know what she's feeling, don't you? That strange quiet ache when something forgotten becomes real again. The tree does not speak. The rain does not explain. But in that moment she does not feel alone. Not because someone is near, but because the past is. She stays there, long after the rain softens. Her dress clings to her like memory. Her breath is slow. Her face is turned upward, not in prayer, but in welcome. And when she finally stands, mud on her knees, water in her lashes, she carries no grief. Only the gift of having remembered. You follow her back to the cave as dusk falls her steps. Soft, her hands open the memory still warm in her chest, like a name spoken in the dark. It will fade, as all memories do. But not entirely. Rain always leaves a trace. It should have gone out hours ago. The wind has died. The sky has darkened into velvet. Even the birds have tucked their voices away beneath their wings. The fire she lit near the cave mouth, small gentle, should have faded by now. But it doesn't. You notice it first, the way the embers refuse to dull, the glow holding steady in the stillness, the flame rising again when it should be resting. She notices too. Europa sits cross-legged on the smooth stone floor shawl, draped around her shoulders, hair still damp from the rain. Her eyes are fixed on the fire, not in fear, not in wonder, in listening. You sit with her. The heat brushes your face warm, but not demanding. She hasn't fed the fire in hours. There is no new wood, no breath coaxing it forward. And yet it stays. The flame dances low and steady, like a voice continuing a story she didn't realize was hers. She leans forward closer, her fingers stretched out but not touching. And slowly she begins to speak. Not loudly, not to the flame. To herself. To the quiet. To you. She speaks of a name she hasn't said in weeks, her father's name, Agenor. She says it once, then lets it rest in the smoke. She speaks of her brothers, of the way one of them always carved shapes into the legs of their chairs, of the way her mother braided her hair too tight on festival days. She speaks not like someone grieving, but like someone reminding the air who she is. The fire crackles a soft response. Not magic, not miracle, just presence. She tells the fire about the bull, for the first time aloud. Not as a myth, as a moment. She describes the weight of his back beneath her, the heat of his breath, the way the sea opened and closed like a wound. And when her voice falters, she doesn't stop. She just lowers her head and lets the fire hold the rest. You watch her place a single olive leaf into the flame. It catches, sparks once, then burns clean. Still the fire does not die. It burns past midnight, through the hush that comes when the world feels furthest from morning. She lies down beside it, not because she's cold, because she's ready. And as she sleeps, the flame leans toward her, not to consume, to watch. You stay a little longer too, watching that strange, persistent light. It will go out before dawn. But tonight, it refuses. It begins the day she leaves the grove. Not far, just a journey inland over the ridge she has never crossed, curiosity perhaps, or the quiet restlessness that settles in after too many still mornings. She leaves before sunrise, carrying a satchel of dried figs, a shell filled with water, and her feather tied now to a strand of her hair, not as ornament, but as memory. You watch her go. Her steps are sure, but soft. She doesn't say goodbye. She doesn't need to. The island watches too. The path grows unfamiliar quickly, stone shifting to moss olive trees replaced by low pines. The scent of the air changes, less salt, more shadow. You walk with her for hours, through narrow passes, and sun-dappled clearings where lizards scatter at her feet. She pauses, at a stream, drinks, and continues on. She doesn't look back. But something behind her does. By midday, the light has turned gold. The birds here have different songs. The rocks wear lichen she's never seen. She gathers a few samples, tucks them into her satchel. Her hands stay busy. Her mind doesn't. And then somewhere beneath her ribs, she feels it. Absence. Not hunger, not fatigue, something quieter. A pull. You feel it too, don't you? That sense that the place she left is noticing. Not mourning, not angry, just aware. The wind doesn't blow from the sea anymore. The trees don't lean toward her. Her footsteps feel louder, less absorbed by the earth. She kneels beside a flat stone, places her hand on it, waits. Nothing. No answer. And for the first time in many days, her face folds not in fear, in missing. She doesn't speak aloud, but the thought is clear. Did I go too far? She turns back. The return is slower, not because she's tired, because she's listening, watching, wondering if the island will receive her again. When she crests the final ridge and sees the glint of her fire pit, her knees soften. She doesn't cry. She just breathes. And the wind returns. From the west, warm and familiar, carrying time, smoke, salt. She steps back into her shelter, touches the stones, runs her hand along the inner wall. You hear her whisper it not to the gods, not even to the trees. To the cave itself. I missed you too. It happens in stillness, as so many turning points do. No thunder, no voice from the sky, just a quiet change in the way the air feels on her skin. She is gathering reeds near the spring, her hands wet her skirt, hem stained with moss. The same motion she's done for days, pull trim bundle. Her body knows it by now. It no longer needs her attention. But something shifts. A rustle, not from wind, not from birds. You feel it too. A presence, watching, waiting. She turns slowly, not startled. She's long past surprise. And standing there just beyond the edge of the grove, 3 figures. Not spirits, not strangers. Sailors. Greek. Dust-streaked, sunburned. One carries a spear, another a waterskin. The third youngest holds a folded piece of cloth that might once have been a flag. They don't speak, not yet. They're waiting for her to make the first move. You feel her breath catch just once, then it steadies. She steps forward. And in that moment, she knows this is the choice. Not what they will ask, but whether she will answer. They speak her name, hesitant, respectful. Word of her presence has traveled, a name carried down hills, across shepherds' paths, through small fires, whispered about in market tongues. Europa. They offer her something, not a command, an invitation. A return. To a world of temples and names, of memory, of myth. To thrones that might one day be hers. You see her hold the offer in silence. She does not look at them. She looks at the island. At the trees that remembered her before she remembered herself. At the stones that kept her warm before she knew she could survive. At the path she walked barefoot until it stopped hurting. And something inside her does not break. It settles. She speaks. Not yes, not no. But something in between. I need one more day. They nod, they wait. And when she walks back toward the shelter, you walk with her. Not because you know what she will choose, but because now, finally, so does she. Night falls slowly, like a curtain pulled by hand. The kind of dusk that doesn't darken everything at once, but lets the shadows gather in corners, first, gently, respectfully. You see her there, Europa, sitting by the fire she built with her own hands. The flames are low-fed carefully, not as warmth, not as light, as witness. This is her last night before the choice, and she knows it. The cave around her is quiet. The trees outside still. Even the wind, once her companion, has retreated into stillness. The island is holding its breath. She lays out the objects, one by one. A stone smoothed by the sea, the white feather, a berry long dried, the piece of reed rope she used to tie her first basket. And last, the shell. The one she drank from on her second day. The one she never threw away. Each item placed on the stone slab with care, as if assembling not tools, but memories. You crouch beside her. You can feel it too, can't you? That strange ache of leaving something before you've truly understood it. She doesn't cry, but her fingers tremble slightly when she touches the feather. She lifts it, holds it to her cheek, then lets it fall back into place. Outside, the sky is full of stars. No clouds, no omens, just light. She stands, steps beyond the firelight, walks barefoot up the rise behind her shelter where the sea opens wide. You follow, quietly. There she breathes in, long, deep, as if drawing the island into her. And then she speaks. Not to you, not to the sailors waiting somewhere beyond the cliffs. To the island. I didn't plan to love you. The words are barely audible, but the wind hears. I didn't expect to survive here. A pause. And yet, I did. You see her close her eyes, place a hand over her heart, not dramatically, as a gesture of truth. If I go, I'll take you with me, not in story, in breath. And then she turns her face to the stars. There's no answer, no voice in the trees. Only quiet, and the sound of the tide. And that is enough. She stays there a long time, until the fire dies, until her name no longer feels borrowed. Tomorrow she will choose. But tonight, she simply belongs. The sky doesn't rise with color. It wakes in silver, a dawn without drama, like a breath held before a word. You see her before the others do, standing alone on the slope above the spring, hair-loose shawl, draped over one shoulder, hands folded around a shell. The sailors wait below where the path curves into the trees. Their voices are quiet. One of them yawns. Another sharpens the end of his staff absently, not watching the ridge. But you watch her. And you know she's already chosen. She walks slowly, not in hesitation, in reverence. Every footfall on the soft earth is like a farewell, not just to place, but to a version of herself she will never fully be again. She doesn't bring anything with her. No bag, no satchel, just the shell held lightly between her fingers like a small, sacred truth. When she reaches the grove, the men straighten. The youngest steps forward, opens his mouth, then stops. She doesn't speak. She just nods. Not to them, to the island. And you feel it. The shift. Like a door being opened with both hands. They begin the descent together, slowly. One of the sailors offers her a water skin. She takes it, drinks, hands it back. No words, no ceremony. The wind stirs as they pass the olive trees. One leaf detaches, floats down, brushes her arm. She catches it without looking, tucks it into the fold of her dress. They do not return to the cave. She doesn't need to. Everything she needed to take, she already carries. The fire now cold, the feather left on the stone, the name spoken into the wind. You walk behind her just once more. As they reach the hill's edge, the sea opens wide before them. A ship waits offshore, small, weathered, patient. They lower a raft. She steps in last, doesn't look back, doesn't need to. Because the island is not something she leaves. It's something she became. And as the raft drifts toward the ship, you hear it. The sound of the wind, rising again, slipping between trees and cliffs, repeating her name so gently, it feels like a blessing. Europa. The sky had been still for hours. Evening fell without resistance, and the ship moved like a cradle across a glassy sea. You could almost forget there was motion. Almost. Europa sits near their prow legs, folded beneath her, a thin wool shawl wrapped around her shoulders. Her back leans against a stack of empty amphorae. She hasn't spoken since they left the island's shadow behind. The sailors murmur to one another in low, tired Greek. The oars creak now and then, but mostly the ship drifts. The captain says the wind is resting, but you feel it before they do. The shift. A pulse beneath the hull, a breath too long between waves, a silence too full of weight. She feels it too. Her eyes flick toward the horizon, then upward. The moon is ablade tonight, sharp, thin, watching. Then, just as the last of the stars begin to appear, the wind returns. Not gentle, not familiar. It hits like a question asked too late. You see the sails shudder, the mast groan. The first wave doesn't crash. It lifts slow and heavy, as if the sea has been holding its strength until now. The sailors jump into motion, voices rising, rope unfurling like startled serpents. But she doesn't move. Europa grips the edge of the hull and stays where she is, her eyes wide open, not in panic, in recognition. This sea is not the one she crossed with the bull, but it knows her, and it remembers. You crouch beside her as the second wave hits harder this time, slapping wood like a rebuke. Salt spray lashes across her face, and still she doesn't blink. Not fear, not defiance. Something quieter. You remember how she used to curl inward when rain fell. Now she opens herself to it. The sky darkens, wind tearing at the sails. The ship groans beneath each wave, but it does not break. Neither does she. You hear the captain shout commands. A rope snaps, a lantern falls and rolls, glowing briefly before vanishing into the black water. Europa's shawl is pulled from her shoulders. She doesn't chase it. She rises. One hand braced against the railing, she walks to the very front of the ship, barefoot on slick wood, her dress clinging like wet bark. And you follow. She places both hands on the rail. Then she speaks. Not to the crew, not to the wind. To the water. I'm not yours anymore. The sea doesn't calm. The wind doesn't ease. But something in the rhythm changes. The waves don't fight harder. They listen. You see it in the way they rise, less sharp, less vengeful, still strong, but steady. She doesn't look back at the others. She stands there until the rain passes. Yes, there is rain now. It arrives almost gently, like the final note of a storm that chose not to end in violence. She closes her eyes, lets it run down her cheeks, over her lips. Not to wash away. To remind her she can stand in the middle of what once destroyed her and not be broken. By the time the storm passes, the ship is soaked but afloat, the sails tattered, the crew exhausted. Europa returns to the stack of amphorae and sits again, water pooling at her feet. She doesn't shiver. She reaches into the folds of her dress and pulls out the shell, the one from the island spring. She presses it to her ear. You can't hear what she hears. But you know. It's not the sea speaking. It's the silence left behind. She closes her fingers around the shell and leans her head back, her face turned upward, her voice low. She says nothing else. But in the hush that follows, you feel the sea recede, not just physically, but emotionally. As if the water has asked its question and accepted the answer. The port arrives like the whisper. Not all harbors are loud. Not all returns come with trumpets. Some places simply wait, shaped by centuries of tide, unbothered by who arrives or leaves. You see at first low buildings, clustered near a gentle bay, whitewashed walls that catch the light in dull tones, sails bobbing like seabirds asleep. Europa stands as the ship approaches, her feet braced, her eyes narrowing not in hesitation but in preparation. Her hair is still damp, the shell still tucked in the folds of her dress. The dockhands don't shout when they see her. They squint, as if her face carries something they almost remember. The boat moors with a soft groan. A plank is lowered. The crew files off, eager for food, coin, dry land. She is the last to step ashore. And the stone beneath her sandals feels heavier than sea. You follow her into the streets where voices rise and fall in bursts of unfamiliar Greek. Not the smooth tongue of scholars or priests. This is market Greek, guttural fast, shaped by fishmongers and smiths. She moves through the crowd with quiet grace, but people notice. A few glance twice. A child points. A name is said softly, uncertainly. But it's not quite right. Europa. With the accent shifted, with a vowel lengthened. A name spoken through another culture's teeth. She doesn't correct them. She turns her head slowly when it's said. She hears it, lets it touch her, then lets it pass. You walk beside her through narrow alleys. The air smells of olives, iron, and sweat. A woman haggles over a bolt of dyed linen. A priest blesses a goat with a handful of ash. None of them know who she is. And yet some do. A merchant leans forward and whispers to his son. A potter glances up and frowns slightly, as if trying to place a memory. A fisherman mutters something about the daughter of a bull. But she keeps walking. You follow her to a shaded courtyard at the edge of the town. A fountain gurgles lazily in the center. 3 pigeons drink without fear. She sits on the lip of the basin, her hands resting in her lap. The water reflects the sky in pale fragments. Someone passes behind her and says it again, Europa. And this time she turns. You're looking for someone, she says, voice quiet but clear. The man hesitates, shrugs. A woman taken by gods. They say she has your eyes. Europa smiles, but not in agreement. They're not mine anymore, she says. They belong to the sea. The man laughs nervously and walks away. She doesn't watch him go. She looks down at the water again. And in her reflection, fleeting, distorted, she sees something she didn't expect. Not a girl taken. Not a myth. A woman who chose to come ashore. And to carry her name in silence, even when others say it wrong. She reaches into her dress and touches the shell, not for guidance. For grounding. You stay a little longer beside her, listening to the market rise behind you. And in that moment, you realize her name no longer needs to be heard correctly, because now she speaks it inward. And that's enough. The temple isn't large, just stone steps worn smooth by sandals and storms rising to a platform flanked by pomegranate trees. Vines curl lazily along the walls. A bronze brazier smolders more smoke than flame. She doesn't go there out of devotion. They send for her. Word spreads fast when the sea delivers a name. You follow her through the quiet of early morning. The streets are hushed, swept clean, still wet from dew. Her sandals make no sound on the stone. At the entrance, a boy greets her barefoot, olive-skinned, no older than 12. He bows low and says the priest is waiting. She nods, says nothing. The temple inside smells of cedar oil and limestone dust. Carvings line the walls. Zeus with his thunderbolt, Europa with her arms outstretched, riding the bull across waves that curl like vines. You see her pause. She stares at the image, not with awe, with quiet detachment. It's her, but not. A version of her shaped by men who never saw her cry on cold stone, who never held the silence she carried across the sea. The priest stands at the altar, young, clean robes, sharp eyes. He smiles when he sees her, not warmly, like a man about to unroll a scroll. Daughter of Zeus, he says, we've been waiting. She tilts her head slightly, not to accept, to ask. Waiting for what? He launches into questions. Did the god speak to you? Were you afraid? Did he promise you glory? Do you carry his child? Was there light? Thunder. A sign. You watch her blink, once, twice. Her hands stay still at her sides. Then she walks forward, past him, past the altar, to the center of the temple floor. She kneels, places her hand palm down on the stone. The priest stutters. He was expecting testimony, a miracle. She speaks one sentence. "This is where I end the story you expect." Silence. The brazier flickers. A bird cries outside. He opens his mouth, closes it. She stands, looks not at him, but at the statue behind him. Zeus carved in perfection, marble eyes blank, one hand raised in eternal command. She walks toward it, not with worship, with understanding, and places the shell not on the altar, but on the floor, at the god's feet. She leaves it there, not as offering, as memory. Then turns and walks out past the priest, past the boy, past the carvings. Outside, the sun has risen higher. She doesn't look back. And you following behind her know this. The temple didn't want her truth. But the stone beneath her hand will remember it longer than any prayer. You hear it before she does. Two women sitting on the steps of a bakery flour on their aprons, speaking in hushed tones as they braid dough. The way they glance toward the road as she passes. The way one of them says it like gossip, like scripture. They say she was taken by a bull made of lightning. Europa walks on eyes forward, but you know she heard. It's not the first time. The story is already spreading, wrapped in salt and half-truths. In this version, she was helpless, beautiful, a gift, a victim rescued from herself by the hand of a god. In this version, she never stood barefoot in the rain or pressed her hand to the earth. In this version, she is someone else's idea of sacred. Later in the shade of a fig tree, she listens again, this time, to children playing with pebbles near a fountain. One child tells the tale in dramatic whispers, arms flailing. She didn't even speak, he says, just held on tight while the bull flew over the sea. The others gasp delighted. One girl claps, another corrects him. She did speak. She begged to be saved. Europa crouches nearby, pretending to watch the pigeons. Her face is unreadable. You wonder if she's angry. But she isn't. She's listening, carefully, gently, like a mother overhearing a dream. That night, she finds a quiet corner behind the inn. A small child sits alone on a bench, tracing shapes in dust with a stick. She sits beside him, no introduction, just presence. He asks, "Did you see the bull?" She pauses, then nods, yes. "Was he made of stars?" She smiles. No, he was warm and quiet, and carried more silence than thunder. The child thinks on this. Did he fly? No, she says. He swam, but the sea held him like it remembered his name. He leans his head on her shoulder. Were you scared? She looks at the sky. The stars are out soft and scattered. Yes, she whispers, but only at first. You sit across from them unseen and feel something settle. She does not correct the stories. She offers another version, a softer thread braided beneath the louder ones. Because stories don't need to fight. They just need to breathe beside one another. And when the child finally falls asleep on her lap, you see her brush the hair from his forehead, gently, reverently, as if blessing him with the truth that isn't always loudest, but lasts longest. The room is quiet, too quiet. You feel it as soon as she steps inside, the way the silence presses in, not like comfort, but like unfamiliar linen, clean but stiff. It's the first room she's slept in with walls since the island. 4 sides of smooth stone, a door that latches a bed of layered fabric too soft beneath her spine, a bowl of water left for washing, a folded towel, and a mirror. Mounted on the far wall, framed in tarnished bronze, The surface cloudy, not quite polished, but whole. She hasn't seen herself like this in months. Not all at once. You watch her hesitate. She moves slowly, stripping off her shawl, undoing the ties at her waist. She stands barefoot in the half-light of early dusk, hands at her sides, gaze drifting. Then she looks. Not quickly, not with vanity. With patience. With weight. The woman in the mirror is not the girl who rode a god across the sea. Her shoulders are broader now, her skin darkened by sun and wind. There are new lines around her mouth. Her hands, when they lift to touch her own cheek, are steady worn. She studies herself the way a cartographer studies a coastline, tracing new lines, unexpected inlets, rough edges, softened by storm. And then her hands move. One across her chest, the other to her stomach. And she breathes in. Not sharply, not with surprise, but as if confirming something she already knew. Her palm rests lightly on the curve just below her ribs. It isn't a shape yet, not visible, but you feel it. So does she. You kneel beside her as she sits on the edge of the bed, facing the mirror, both hands now resting over that quiet space. She doesn't cry. She doesn't smile. She whispers something to the glass, a name maybe, a promise. You don't need to hear it. Because this isn't about hearing. It's about returning. To herself. To a future that no longer waits to be written by others. She lies down that night without fear. And the mirror still hanging, still watching, holds her reflection, not as proof of beauty, but as evidence of becoming. The ink is brown, faint, pressed from crushed berries and mixed with ash. The paper is rough, scraped from papyrus someone traded for wine. She sits at a narrow table by the window, the shutters half closed, against the late morning light. A breeze stirs the edge of the page. Her fingers hold the reed pen lightly, the tip already stained. You watch her from the quiet breath held. She doesn't write quickly. This is not a record, not a list. It's a letter. Addressed to someone she hasn't spoken to in seasons. To her mother. You feel the weight in every line, not just words, decisions. She begins not with apology, not with fear. With memory. The smell of baked figs on festival mornings, the cool press of stone beneath bare feet, the sound of weaving combs clicking from the upper room. You see it unfold across the parchment, one small line at a time. She does not write about gods. She does not name the bull. She does not describe the island or the fire or the choice. Instead, she writes about silence, about learning to breathe when there is no one to echo your breath. She writes, I learned to hear myself when no one else called my name. She writes, I carry home with me, not behind me. She pauses, looks up at the rafters, then back down. The ink dries too fast. She dips the pen again, finishes the letter with a single line. If I do not return, know that I did not vanish. I unfolded. Then she stops. Doesn't sign it, doesn't fold it. Just lays it flat on the table. And stares. You wait, thinking she'll seal it, ask for it to be delivered, press it into a courier's hand. But she doesn't. She leaves it there. By dusk, the breeze has dried it, curled its corners. She passes by the table twice, touches the edge of the page once, then turns away. The letter was never meant to arrive, only to be written. Because some truths only need to live once on paper in silence, to be real forever. He arrives late in the day. Dust on his boots, sweat at his temples, the smell of leather travel and long stories. She's in the courtyard, peeling olives into a clay bowl, sleeves rolled to her elbows. The day has been quiet, long, uneventful, until now. He doesn't call her name. He doesn't bow. He simply stands at the gate and waits until she notices. And when she does, she freezes. Not because of fear, but because of recognition. You feel it too, don't you? Something in the way he stands. Like someone who spent his life listening to myths and now sees one breathing before him. He doesn't speak right away. When he does, his voice is low. They said you were beautiful. They didn't say you'd look like that. She tilts her head. Like what? He shrugs. Like the storm never left your eyes. You see the way she blinks, once, slowly. Not in offense, in memory. He steps closer, not bold, not timid. I don't want to retell your story, he says. I only want to know what you saw when he looked at you. She doesn't answer immediately. Instead, she offers him a seat on the stone bench, pours water into a cup from the jug beside her. Then she speaks. He didn't look at me the way men look at women. The stranger waits. He looked like the sea looks when it decides to take something back. They sit in silence. The sun slips behind the archway. He doesn't press, doesn't ask for proof, doesn't reach for her hand. He just says, I believe you. And it startles her more than any question ever could. You watch her nod slow and small. Then she says something unexpected. He wasn't cruel. The stranger doesn't respond, not out of judgment, out of respect. Because he understands something most don't. That a girl taken across a sea by a god might still carry power in her own bones. And that not all stories are meant to be made clean. Before he leaves, he stands and looks at her again. The bull left your side, he says, but not your gaze. And then he walks away. You follow her inside where she stands before the mirror, not searching her reflection, but her eyes. She stares into them, unblinking. And for a moment, you think you see it too. Not horns, not divinity, but depth. A tide that once carried her so far from shore, and now lives quietly behind her gaze, waiting for no one's permission to exist. It starts with a question. Not cruel, not mocking, just casual. The kind of question people ask when they think your story belongs to them. Was it really Zeus? She's in the market selecting figs from a woven basket, the smell of ripeness thick in the air. A woman beside her leans in curious, not malicious, just drawn by legend. Europa straightens, sets down the fig. And for a moment, you wonder if she'll answer. She doesn't. She smiles gently, picks up a different fig, turns it in her hand. The woman waits, shifting from one foot to the other. I mean, that's what they say, right? That you were carried by the king of the gods. Europa places the fruit in her basket, looks up not at the woman, but at the sky. She says nothing. And the silence stretches not tense, not angry, just full. Like the sea before a storm. The woman shrinks slightly, chuckles. Sorry, I just thought you'd... Europa cuts the stem of a grapevine and walks away. That's all. No explanation. No retelling. You walk beside her through the shade of the market stalls, and something in her gait has shifted. Not speed, weight. She doesn't owe them anything. Not their curiosity, not their satisfaction, not her pain turned into poetry. Later that morning, a boy asks her what color the bull's eyes were. She smiles and says, yours. He laughs, runs off, doesn't press. She watches him go, and for the first time you see it. She is no longer the story they pass around fires. She is the fire. She is the silence between one tale and the next. She is the part no one gets to own. Not because she's hiding, but because she doesn't need to explain the ocean to someone who's never stood in it. She walks home with her basket full. and her mouth finally still. She doesn't look like Europa. At least not yet. She's small, wide-eyed, always asking questions that don't need answers. She trails behind the older women in the olive groves, hands full of acorns, mouth full of words. But when she sees Europa, she stops. Every time. No fear, no awe, just stillness. As if something in her recognizes something in the woman who once crossed the sea. You've seen it before. The way memory travels sideways through gestures, through glances, through the way a child stands when the wind rises. Today, Europa invites her inside. The child steps carefully across the threshold, eyes darting to the painted bowl, the cracked cup, the feather still pinned above the lintel. Is it true, the girl asks, that a god loved you? Europa pours water into a clay cup and hands it to her. I love myself, she says. He just passed through. The child frowns, chewing on the thought. And the bull? He was part of the story. Are you still in the story? Europa doesn't answer, not directly. Instead, she picks up a small piece of driftwood from her shelf, smooth, curled like a question mark. She places it in the girl's hand. The child stares at it. What do I do with it? Carry it, Europa says. Keep it until it means something. You watch the child nod seriously, as if she's been given a relic. And maybe she has. Not of divinity. Of survival. Later, when the child leaves, she turns back at the gate. What's your name again? She asks. Europa. The girl blinks. That's mine too. Europa smiles, not with surprise. With recognition. You feel it, don't you? The story never ends. It changes clothes. It walks on smaller feet. It asks again, in another voice, for another answer. And this time, Europa gives not her legend, but her name. Not as burden, as gift. It doesn't look like much from the outside. A low house with white walls, vines creeping up one side, and a wooden door that sticks in summer. A garden that grows wild in some corners, precise in others. A bench made from a broken ship plank. But inside, it holds the rhythm of a life she shaped one breath at a time. Europa moves through it quietly now, not with caution, but with intimacy. Her fingers trail the walls as she walks. Not to find her way, she knows it blind, but to say hello. The space has bent to her. A shelf holds stones she never named. A bowl still carries the curve of her first island fire. Near the window, a faded scrap of linen, once a shawl, now a curtain, filters light into soft gold. You see her pause on the hearth. The fire isn't lit today, but the ashes are still warm. She kneels not to pray, not to remember. To tend. She smooths the edges of the hearth with her palm, straightens the bundle of reeds. Then stands. She doesn't rush. The house doesn't ask for urgency. This is not a palace, not a shrine. It's what remains when survival becomes stillness. And stillness becomes home. Outside, a goat bleats from somewhere down the hill. A neighbor calls to her child. Olive branches sway against the light. Europa steps onto the small stoop and sits. Her belly is round now, not hidden. Her hands rest over it naturally, like they've always known how. She doesn't look toward the sea, not anymore. Not because she's forgotten it. Because she carries it with her. You sit beside her. The sun is soft on your arms. The stone beneath your feet is warm. And for a long moment, neither of you moves. Because this quiet, ordinary breathing moment is what the myths never show. Not the wave, not the bull, not the glory, but the shape of a life made whole again. One room at a time, one breath, one name spoken only to herself. It's not dramatic. It doesn't arrive like thunder. It doesn't echo through temples. Her voice returns the way lost birds do, quietly, at the edge of morning. She wakes before dawn. The sky still indigo, the air just barely cool enough to lift the curtain. Her breath fogs for a moment, in the pale blue dark. She doesn't speak often anymore, not from fear or distance, but because the world no longer demands noise from her. But this morning, her throat hums. You feel it before she does, a ripple, a tension just under the collarbone, like something waiting to be let go. She walks to the window. The sky is beginning to pull itself open. A single olive tree stands framed in silhouette. And then softly she sings. You've heard her hum before, quiet threads of melody without shape. But this is language. Old words, words she thought she left behind on the shore, words in her mother's tongue. She sings without performance, without fear of being heard. She sings like someone speaking to no one and to everyone. The notes catch at first, her voice rusty fragile. But she doesn't stop. She sings through it, the way a fire grows past smoke. You see her close her eyes, tilt her head slightly, as if remembering the weight of lullabies, the shape of vowels she once pressed into her brother's hands. This is not the voice of a girl taken. It's the voice of a woman who stayed, who chose, who rebuilt. And now in the hush between stars and sun, she speaks her own name, not to be recognized. To recognize herself. Outside, a bird answers her, not mimicking, echoing. She smiles, not at it, not at anything. She smiles, because the sound of her voice, raw and unfinished, is finally hers again. Not borrowed, not silenced, not divine. Just human. Just Europa. They arrive just before dusk. Two of them travelers from a coastal town. One older, walking with a limp. One younger, eyes always scanning the road behind them. They're not looking for her. They're looking for a place to rest. She sees them from her garden, a basket of herbs on one hip, her other hand brushing rosemary to release the scent. They ask if there's a well nearby, if there's shade, if it's safe. They don't ask her name. You see the moment land softly on her, this small, ordinary grace. To be seen not as a myth, not as a symbol, not as a story, but simply as someone who might know where the water is. She offers them a cup cool and clay, leads them to a stool in the shade, cuts a fig in half, and presses it into the older man's hand. They talk. About the road, the heat, the price of bread in other towns. Not about bulls, not about gods, not about what she once was. And for a while, she lets herself disappear into their not knowing. The younger one compliments the garden, asks how she keeps the vines from withering. Timing, she says. It's the only word she speaks for a long stretch, but it's enough. They rest, drink, thank her. Before they leave, the older one turns back and says, You remind me of someone, a woman in a story. She doesn't blink. Was she tired? No, steady. And then they walk on. You watch her, watching them, until they disappear beyond the bend. Not with longing, not with regret. Just stillness. Then she turns back to the door, steps inside, and begins to hum. Because sometimes the greatest relief is not being remembered, but being mistaken for no one at all. It begins with bread. She wakes early, kneads the dough with both hands, presses her palms into the soft rise and fall, and for once doesn't think of who taught her. No visions of her mother's fingers, no ghost of her sister's laughter from the corner of a shared kitchen, no memory clinging to the scent of yeast. Just motion, just warmth, just the sound of breath. She doesn't know what changed, only that it did. You notice it before she does, the way she hums with no sorrow in it, the way her back is straighter when she carries the clay bowl to the hearth, the way the morning light touches her, without apology. The guilt used to be everywhere. For leaving, for surviving, for not dying when the story said she should. She carried it in her joints, in her throat. In the silence she wrapped around herself like linen. But not today. Today she rises. Today she bakes. Today she breathes without measuring how much space she takes. A neighbor calls to her from the path. She waves, not timidly, openly. You see her sit by the doorway as the bread cools, legs crossed, a fig in her hand, juice slipping down her wrist. She doesn't wipe it away. Because she's not trying to stay clean anymore. She's not trying to stay small. When the bread is ready, she breaks a piece and eats it slowly. Not like sacrament. Like breakfast. And when she swallows the last bite, she leans back against the wall, eyes closed, lips parted in something like stillness. Or maybe joy. You sit with her, you don't speak, you don't need to. Because today is the day she stops owing anyone her sadness. Not the gods, not the world, not even herself. And in that silence, soft, sunlit, free, Europa finally tastes peace. Not as a prize, but as her own. The moon is full, round as a silver bowl, tipped gently over the horizon. It's the kind of night when myths return, when stories wake, when gods are said to walk among mortals cloaked in fog, or antlers, or charm. She knows this. She feels it in her bones, the tug of memory that once answered to thunder. You watch her step outside her home, hair unbound, no shawl, just skin and breath and knowing. She walks to the edge of the field, where the olives grow, past the brush, past the last fence post. And waits. You wait with her. For something. A sound, a hoofbeat, a breath that isn't hers. She doesn't say his name. She hasn't in moons. But the air remembers it, the way her blood used to quicken under starlight. And still, he doesn't come. Not in shadow, not in dream, not even in silence. There is no white bull tonight, no gleaming eyes in the dark, no God-shaped memory to reclaim her. Only the rustle of grass, the creak of trees, the thrum of her own pulse in her wrists. And slowly she smiles. Not with triumph, not with relief. With understanding. You see her sit down on the ground, folding her legs beneath her, resting one hand flat on the earth. He's not coming back. Because he was never meant to stay. She lifts her head to the sky, watches a cloud drift across the moon. Then she whispers not to him, to herself. You did what you came for. And she doesn't mean the god. She means the girl she was, who once climbed onto his back and gave up her name for the sea. She means the silence that followed, the fire she rebuilt, the path she forged with no map. You sit beside her until the moon begins to fade. And together, you listen to the world not waiting, not watching, just being. Because tonight, there is no God. And she doesn't need one. He is born just after dawn. Not with a scream, but with a sigh, like someone waking from a long dream into something gentler. Europa holds him before anyone else can. Her hands steady her breath, calm her face still wet with sweat and something older than pain. You're there sitting quietly in the corner of the room as the midwife moves softly around her. There is no panic, no noise, only the quiet rhythm of newness. The boy's eyes are closed, his limbs curled, his skin flushed from effort. He doesn't cry right away. And no one asks him to. Europa hums instead, just a single note, low, slow, familiar. The same melody she once sang to the wind, to the shell, to the spring. Now it's his. She doesn't ask the gods for blessing. She doesn't mark his forehead with oil or speak his name aloud to the sky. She simply presses her cheek to his and whispers, "You are safe." And you feel it, the weight of that promise. Not grand, not mythic, just true. You watch him grow, slowly, steadily. He learns to walk by holding on to the edge of the hearth. He giggles when the bread rises. He sleeps with one hand curled around a piece of sea glass. He doesn't flinch when thunder comes, because no one has taught him to fear what moves. He walks beside her, in the grove, asks questions in strings. Why do leaves fall? Why do birds fly alone? She doesn't answer everything. She doesn't need to. He's growing in the shadow of someone who once rebuilt herself from silence. And so he learns how to listen. One evening he sits beside her and says, "They say you were taken." Europa looks down at him, her fingers woven with time. She smiles. "I went. That's all." And he nods satisfied. Not because he understands the whole story, but because he trusts the part that matters. She came back and made something softer for him. You walk with them one morning to the hill overlooking the sea. The boy stands still, arms wide, letting the wind push against his chest. And when Europa calls his name, he turns, not afraid, not small, but shining. Because in a world that's built so many stories on stolen girls and storming gods, here is one boy who grows without their weight. Because she, Europa, broke the pattern and rewrote it in lullabies. The town is lit with ribbons and torches. Children chase each other through the square with garlands in their hair. Music tumbles out of windows and doorways like spilled wine. It's the festival of arrival, of crossing, of the sea's favor. Irony, perhaps, but she doesn't laugh at it. She simply walks through the crowd, her son's hand in hers, her basket light on her hip. No one stops her. No one points. Because here tonight, she is no one of interest. And that, too, is a kind of freedom. You walk beside her as they pass the storytellers. One stands on a crate, arms wide, eyes bright. He tells the tale with flair. The god who became a bull, the girl who was stolen, the island where she was made queen. He adds details that shimmer, sapphires on her wrists, lightning in the bull's breath, a palace that rose from the foam. Europa stops to listen. Her son tugs at her sleeve. "Is that you?" he asks. She smiles softly. That's one version. The storyteller bows to applause. Coins fall into his cup. She drops one in too. Not for truth. For craft. For keeping a flame alive even if it casts shadows. Later she joins the dance at the edge of the square, not in the center, in the quiet spiral of older women and tired men. She doesn't wear a crown of flowers. She doesn't wear white. She wears linen, the color of ash and time, her hair tied in a knot that doesn't need to be seen. You see how she moves, not to be noticed, but to remember how her body feels in motion. No one stops her to ask her name. No one bows. And in that absence, she glows. Because sometimes the deepest peace is this: to be surrounded by joy you didn't have to create and still feel like you belong. You watch her and her son share a piece of honey bread as the night cools. He doesn't ask for stories tonight, and she doesn't offer any. They walk home through streets lit by paper lanterns, and the myth sleeps while the woman lives. It comes in the middle of a quiet day. Not during ritual, not beneath stars, just while she's shelling beans at the table, her son reading aloud from a scrap of borrowed parchment. He pauses mid-sentence, looks up, blinks, and asks, "Why didn't you run?" Not in judgment, not in confusion, in pure childlike need. You watch her hands still. One shell falls to the floor, and rolls under the bench. She doesn't answer right away. She looks out the window. The sky is blue still. A single cloud floats like a thought unspoken. And you feel it, the shift in the air. The question he didn't know he was asking. Why did you go with the bull? Why didn't you scream? Why did you stay on the island? Why didn't you fight the story? She turns back to him, meets his eyes, and says, "Because I didn't know yet that I had the right to run." He opens his mouth, then closes it. She continues, voice soft but even. "When it happened, I was still made of what they told me I was. A daughter, a gift, a prize. I didn't know I was allowed to be more than that." He's too young to understand it all, but he hears it. And sometimes hearing is enough. She leans forward and takes his hand. "But I learned. The world didn't teach me. I had to teach myself." You see him nod slowly, thoughtfully. Then he says, "You would run now." She smiles, not with pride, with quiet certainty. "Yes," she says, "or I would turn and face what chased me." And with that, they return to the beans. The silence is different now, not full of shadows, full of knowing. You sit with them through the rest of the afternoon. Because some questions don't need perfect answers. They need presence. And the courage to finally say, "I didn't know then, but I do now." They ask her one spring if she will go back to the island. The one with the cliffs, the olive tree, the cave. The one where she became someone else. A merchant offers her passage, says he sails near there anyway, says it might be healing, says she could see what's become of it. Europa smiles politely and says no. No hesitation, no story, no explanation. You watch the merchant blink, surprised. He was expecting sentiment, a tear, a myth rethreaded. She only returns to her bread, to the herbs drying by the fire, to the soft thump of her child's footsteps in the next room. Later in the still of evening, she sits in the doorway and lets the question revisit her. Not the man's words, but her own answer. No. Not because she's afraid, not because the island haunts her, not because she left something unfinished, but because she didn't leave it behind. She carries it in this way she ties her hair, in the way she listens to silence, in the way she never flinches when someone says the word taken. The island is not a place on a map anymore. It's folded into her hands, pressed into the lines of her voice, carved gently into the bones of her back. Returning would not give her anything she doesn't already hold. She doesn't need to walk those cliffs to remember them. She doesn't need to see the cave to know what it taught her. You sit beside her in the dark, the sound of crickets thick around you. And she exhales, not with longing, with peace. Because sometimes the most powerful thing a woman can do is say, "I lived there," and never feel the need to go back. It comes late. A quiet night, cool air curling around the house like a cat. The kind of night where dreams slip in unnoticed, barefoot and bold. But this one isn't hers. You can feel it from the first breath. Europa sleeps curled on her side, her hand tucked beneath her cheek, her breathing steady, but her brow twitches, her lips part. And inside the dream, she is standing in a hall she's never seen, columns of marble, torches burning blue, her feet bare on a polished floor that echoes with no sound. She looks down. Her dress is white, heavier than anything she's worn in years, embroidered with gold thread she never owned. You feel her realize this isn't memory, this isn't even desire. It's something built for her, but not by her. A myth's idea of who she should have been. Voices call her name Europa, Europa, but not lovingly, formally. As if she is a statue that stepped down from its pedestal and forgot its place. A figure steps from the shadows. Not the bull. A man. Radiant. Too radiant. His face is blank and beautiful in the way lies are beautiful. He extends a hand. You belong here. And you feel her recoil, not outwardly, inwardly. She doesn't take the hand. She doesn't run either. She simply says quietly, steadily, "No, you dreamed me wrong." And with that, the hall begins to fade. The columns blur. The torches sputter. She wakes before dawn, the blanket half off the fire, long cold. She doesn't sit up, doesn't gasp. She just lies still. And then smiles, not with comfort, with defiance. Because she knows the difference now between a dream you create and one the world tries to give you. She chooses her own. Every time. There is no final moment, no curtain call, no voice from the sky. Just a morning. Bright, quiet, soft with dust. Europa opens the door and steps outside, barefoot. As always, her robe pulled snug around her shoulders. A breeze lifts the hem. Birds argue in the olive tree. The child, taller now, sleeps curled in a patch of sun. A basket half woven lies near his hands. She doesn't wake him. She watches. And you beside her understand this is not the end. This is the rhythm that has become her. A pot of lentils simmering over fire. Footsteps across warm tile. A name spoken only when it's needed. A story remembered without being told. She kneels in the garden, pulls a weed, moves a stone, hums without realizing it. No gods come. No myths return. And still the world is full. You see her stand and stretch, turn toward the sea, not with longing, not even with memory. With familiarity. The sea does not ask her to come back. It already lives in her spine, in her silence, in her strength. A neighbor calls her name, the real one, the ordinary one. She answers. Not as a queen, not as a victim. As herself. Because the life she lives now, this quiet, chosen, unremarkable life, is hers. And every day it becomes more so. Not in great leaps, but in soft mornings, and unmade beds, and bread that rises without help. You walk with her to the grove, and for the first time you realize she is not waiting to become anything else. She already has, over and over again. And the becoming never stops. You made it to the end. Or so it seems. But maybe that's the first thing we should let go, the idea of endings. Because the story you've just followed slowly and gently was never truly about how it began, or even how it ended. It was about how someone learned to live through a story that wasn't written for her. Europa. A name you may have heard before in classrooms, or carved into the stone corners of an old mythology book. She's often a symbol, a metaphor, a continent's namesake, a passive figure swept off her feet by a god, by fate, by legend. But that isn't the version we stayed with tonight. You didn't walk with a symbol. You walked with a girl, then with a woman, then with someone who simply chose to be. You followed her barefoot across the island's cliffs, through silence, through fire, through memory and rain. You watched her rebuild her voice, not by shouting, but by breathing into stillness. And slowly, as each day passed, as each moment landed quietly inside her ribcage, she became something no myth ever gave her permission to be. A person. Not a goddess, not a queen, not a warning, not a prize. Just a person. Soft, strong, and real. It's strange, isn't it, how survival can feel like resistance, especially when the story expects something else. Expecting you to break, expecting you to vanish, expecting you to become a symbol for someone else's comfort. But Europa didn't. She survived in the most radical way by staying, by living, by holding her own name close even when the world tried to rename her. And maybe that's what we do too in our own quiet ways. Maybe you've had stories forced onto you, expectations pressed like wet clay around your life. Maybe people have told you who you are, loudly, repeatedly, as if their voices mattered more than your breath. And maybe you've believed them. For a while. Until you didn't. Until something small, like the sound of a song in your own voice, or the way your hands make tea, or the fact that you woke up again today, told you otherwise. Told you you are still becoming. That's what Europa did. Not all at once, not with certainty, not with perfection, but with presence. She became, and kept becoming. Names are strange things, aren't they? They begin as sounds, given to us before we understand meaning, shaped by someone else's voice, held up like mirrors or cages. And yet, at some point we're left holding them, alone. Like Europa. Her name wasn't hers at first. It was a banner others carried, a story told in rooms she never entered, a song sung by men who never asked if she wanted to be remembered at all. You watched what she did with it. She didn't discard it. She didn't carve a new one. She held it, in silence. Not as obedience. As choice. She walked through the world, letting the name be misunderstood, mispronounced, mythologized, until it softened in her hands. Until it became something she could say without flinching. Until it became hers. Maybe you felt something like that too. Maybe you've gone quiet when people said your name with expectation. Maybe you've changed how you say it depending on who's listening. Maybe you've whispered it back to yourself some nights, wondering if it still fits. That's not weakness. That's resilience. To carry your name, not like a shield, not like a flag, but like a stone warmed by the sun, something weighty, real, something shaped slowly by weather and time. Europa didn't shout her name from cliffs. She taught it to the wind, to the trees, to her child. She made it an offering, not a brand, not a battle cry. And somehow, that made it louder than all the stories that had tried to define her. You can do the same. You don't need to explain yourself to be whole. You don't need to be loud to be true. You don't need to correct every misunderstanding to remain real. You just need to stay. To breathe. To let your name settle into the shape of your life. Even if it takes years, even if it's never fully understood by anyone but you. Because maybe the most powerful name is the one that holds itself gently, in silence, and never needs to prove a thing. We talk about leaving like it's a clean break, as if the places we walk away from stop echoing in our steps, as if the silence we survived doesn't hum quietly in our breath, as if the people we once were aren't still curled in the corners of our memory. But Europa knew the truth. She left the island, yes, but the island never left her. Because leaving isn't about distance. It's about what you take and what you don't. She didn't take the fire she built. She didn't take the olive tree. She didn't take the shell in the end, or the stone, or the name carved into myth. She took something softer. The way the earth felt beneath her bare feet, the rhythm of a life no longer built for performance, the sound of her own voice returning slowly through breath and humming. And she left behind something even more powerful, the idea that she needed to stay to be worthy, the belief that her story only mattered if others saw it, the part of her that waited for someone else to give her meaning. Maybe you've left places too. Not just houses or cities, but roles, beliefs, versions of yourself that once felt permanent. And maybe like her, you weren't sure what you were allowed to carry. So let me remind you gently. You can leave a place and still love it. You can carry the softness of something without returning to its pain. You can remember what it gave you without needing to go back. Europa didn't need to retrace her steps to prove the story mattered. She lived it forward. She built a quiet life. She raised a child without the weight of myth. She stood in the sunlight and didn't wait for a god to speak again. And maybe that's what leaving is in the end. Not escape, not forgetting, but choosing what becomes part of you. And what you finally let go. You've been here a while now. Drifting with her, breathing slower, listening longer. Maybe you didn't realize how far you'd come. Maybe you thought this was a story about someone else, about Europa, about a girl and a god and a bull and a sea. But it wasn't, not really. This was a story about you. About your quiet, your rhythm, your choice to stay right here listening to the soft turning of a life that didn't ask for attention. That matters. Because in a world that shouts to choose stillness is radical. To be soft is powerful. To be steady is revolutionary. To breathe through pain and not become it. To leave a place without burning it down. To carry your story like a cup of water balanced in open hands. That is strength. You carry that now. In the hush inside your chest. In the slowness of your thoughts. In the weightless space between your name and the world's echo of it. Europa doesn't need to speak again. You've heard her. She's alive in the silence now, the kind of silence that doesn't erase, it remembers. You've reached the end. But nothing here ends. Because you'll take this quiet with you. Back into your own life, into the morning that waits for you, into the noise you'll return to, but with a softness that cannot be undone. And whenever it's too much, whenever the story tries to rewrite you, close your eyes. And remember the girl on the shore, the woman in the doorway, the fire that didn't die, and the silence that became hers. And then maybe you'll remember that it's yours too. You're still here, still breathing, still resting. And your body knows it. The tension in your shoulders has softened. Your breath is slower now, more full. There's no rush, no next thing. Like Europa, who no longer measured time by footsteps or storms, you've entered a moment that asks nothing of you. Let it hold you. Let this stillness wrap around your ribs like sea-warmed cloth. Let your chest rise and fall without instruction. This is the beginning of nothing urgent, and nothing has to happen now. Only rest. Close your eyes. Just for a moment, or longer if that feels better. Think of your name, not the way others say it, not how it appears on paper or screens, just how it feels inside your mouth, behind your eyes, at the back of your mind. You don't need to say it aloud. It belongs to you and you alone. In this moment where no one is watching, where you owe nothing but breath. Let your name float there gently. Let it be soft, unfinished, yours. Like Europa's name, not a headline, but a hum. Maybe you didn't know it, but as you listened, as you lay here, you built something. Not with stone or fire, but with attention, with presence, with the quiet work of staying. You've made a space inside yourself now. A small, steady island where you are not chased, not demanded, not defined by anyone else's voice. It's yours, and it doesn't go away when the story ends. It stays, because you stay. Still, breathing, here. Whatever you carried when this began, you can set it down. You don't have to solve anything, or prove anything, or be anything tonight. You can let go of the questions, of the noise, of the stories that don't belong to you anymore. Even if just for now, you are allowed to be unfinished, allowed to be quiet, allowed to be free. You are not behind, you are not late, why inside, you are simply resting, and that is more than enough. Far away beyond the edge of your thoughts, the sea is calm. No gods arrive in storms, no bull rises from the foam, just tide, and sky, and wind that hums like memory. Europa is asleep now, somewhere curled beside her child, in a house that smells of herbs and firewood. You don't have to be there, but you can borrow that peace. The kind that doesn't need explanation, that asks no questions, that simply says, stay. There's nothing left to understand, no final thought to think. Just this. The weight of your body sinking gently, the sound of your breath, in, out, in, out. This is the part of the story where nothing happens. Where you drift, where your mind unthreads itself softly, where you forget where Europa ends and where you begin. Let the story dissolve, let your muscles melt, let sleep take you without resistance. Because the most beautiful part of any myth is the silence that follows it. And tonight, that silence is yours.